Back at Apex Construction, Cassandra Vance was facing a crisis that made her head spin. As if the disaster with the overseas project wasn't enough, the Croft family's implosion had happened at the exact same time, and the development zone project had been officially halted the night before. In the conference room, Cassandra's face was a mask of fury. She slammed her palm on the table, again and again. Well, say something. Has this company been paying you white-collar parasites for nothing all these years? The board members sat with their heads hung low, their lips sealed. Cassandra's eyes, burning with rage, scanned each of their faces. When the silence stretched on, she was about to unleash a string of curses when Sean Bellamy burst into the room, flustered. Chairwoman, the foreign government has already taken our key personnel into custody. Their regulatory agencies are all involved in the investigation, even their version of the IRS. And what's more, the insurance company is refusing to communicate. They say they'll wait until the cause of the accident is determined before they'll even talk to us. Sean's voice trailed off. From the moment he'd entered, the board members had stared at him with undisguised contempt, their mouths tightening into thin lines. Are they kidding me? They're just trying to weasel out of it. Cassandra shrieked. Several of those insurance contracts state explicitly that in the event of a fire, regardless of whether it was arson or accidental, they're obligated to pay a proportional amount. Sean lowered his head, not knowing what to say. Cassandra took a deep, shuddering breath and turned her wrath back on the board. Gentlemen, this corporation is at a life-or-death crossroads. Do you really have no solutions? Have I, Cassandra Vance, ever mistreated you? How much has this company paid you in dividends? Huh? Don't you have any idea? I'm begging you, just lend me a little from your own pockets. I'll treat it as a loan. Once we get through this, I'll pay you back with interest. How about it? The mere suggestion of touching their personal wealth was enough to make the board members revolt. One of the older directors, who had long despised Sean Bellamy, shot to his feet and slammed his fist on the table. Cassandra, Apex Construction isn't your personal piggy bank. Did you think you could do whatever you wanted? Huh, that's a bit tyrannical, don't you think? Sean glared at him. How dare you speak to the chairwoman like that? Shut your goddamn mouth, the old director roared back. This was a perfectly good company until your brilliant house-cleaning strategy threw everyone into a panic and alienated all our allies. Every member of this board is a respected figure. You fire people on a whim. Don't give me that bullshit about not tolerating any dissent. Who the hell runs a company like this? That's not a firm hand. That's slitting your own throat. And you, Sean Bellamy, you fancy yourself a master orator, but one disastrous interview, and you vaporized over $5 billion of our market value. And it's still dropping. If it weren't for you, would the company be so strapped for cash that we can't handle this crisis? He then turned his glare on Cassandra. And now, what's your brilliant plan? What else can we do? Our liquid capital is tied up with the Crofts, and our other projects are bleeding money every day. If you want to cover the losses from the overseas project, the only option is to mortgage company assets. You want us to use our own money? Are you asking us to sell our shares at rock-bottom prices just to bail you out? Sean Bellamy's mouth hung open, utterly speechless. Cassandra ground her back teeth, her eyes fixed on the old director with a chilling coldness. You're right. Apex Construction isn't just my company, which is why you all have to step up and contribute. The old director laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Fine. We'll contribute, but on one condition. You, Cassandra Vance, lead by example and give up a portion of your shares first. The other directors remained silent, but their eyes voiced their unanimous support. Cassandra knew this wasn't the time for brute force, but she couldn't bear the thought of relinquishing her own equity. The standoff hung heavy in the air until Mr. Zhu, another senior director, suddenly stood up. What is this? A mutiny, he said, his voice laced with annoyance. The enemy's fist hasn't even landed on our faces, and we're already tearing each other apart. What kind of way is this to behave? Mr. Zhu's position on the board was second only to Cassandra's. As a veteran who had helped build Apex, his words carried weight. The other directors exchanged glances, not daring to press their point any further. Cassandra looked at him, a flicker of comfort in her eyes. In a crisis, the old guard was still the most reliable. Mr. Zhu scanned the room, his tone measured. At this point, assigning blame is pointless. What's important is that we unite and weather this storm together. He then turned to Cassandra. In my opinion, we shouldn't touch a single penny of the little capital the company has left. In fact, we should take out another loan and use all of it for the daily expenses of our other projects to prevent any more surprises. As for the money tied up with Croft Consolidated, we can forget about that for now. We, We need to find a way to raise the capital ourselves. Cassandra understood the look in his eyes. He was telling her to do what she'd always done before. Whenever disaster struck, she went to her father for money. But this time, her father was acting completely out of character. He refused to even see her, let alone lend her money. She couldn't let the board know this. Their respect for her was entirely propped up by their fear of Theodore Vance. If they found out he'd cut her off, the consequences would be unimaginable. After a long pause, Cassandra offered a sincere apology to the directors, her tone softening considerably. Gentlemen, I was on edge. I was rude to you. Honestly, we've sailed these seas together for decades, overcoming every obstacle to build the apex of today. This time, I truly hope we can all pull together, just like we always have, and get through this. I, Cassandra Vance, thank you, my old brothers, in advance. Let's adjourn for today. Please, go home, think about it. And I promise, I will set an example you can all be satisfied with. After the board members left, Mr. Zhu volunteered, Cassandra, I've checked the flights. I'll head overseas at noon to handle that mess. As for things here at home, he trailed off, his expression growing complicated. Cassandra sighed. Just say it, Zhu. There's no need for that between us. Mr. Zhu hesitated, glancing at Sean Bellamy, standing beside Cassandra, before slowly closing his eyes. For things here, you must be the one to make the decisions. We can't afford any more chaos. And find a way to borrow some money. The overseas project will require a fortune to clean up. Unless we pull out, give up, then all that's left is to sue the insurance company. Cassandra frowned. No, I fought too hard for that project. The profit margins are too high. I can't just walk away. I'll find the money. This is just a setback. It won't break us. Mr. Zhu's gaze was complex. He stared at her for a moment, then said, if it really comes to it, I'll sell some of my shares. It'll provide some emergency funds for the company and set an example for the other directors. Cassandra saw the faint glint of a trial balloon in his eyes and refused without a second thought. How could I let you do that? Our stock price is in the gutter right now. If anyone's going to take a loss, it's me. If anyone's going to set an example, it's me. You just focus on handling the overseas project. Leave the money to me. Mr. Zhu said no more. He nodded and turned to leave. Halfway to the door, he stopped abruptly, standing motionless for a second before striding out. Cassandra watched his retreating back and let out a long sigh. Sean Bellamy, looking thoughtful, said, Chairwoman, you refused to let him sell his shares. Were you trying to secure his loyalty? Cassandra sank into her chair. Right now, besides him, who else can I trust? I can't afford to break his heart. Sean nodded. Then his face clouded with worry. Chairwoman, with a deficit this large, where on earth are we going to find the money? The news about the overseas project has probably already reached every financial institution. And with the Croft family imploding, as their primary partner, I'm afraid no one will be willing to lend to us. It was true. With Cassandra's domineering and sharp-tongued nature, she had made countless enemies over the years and had almost no true friends. Now that she was in the eye of the storm, only a fool would offer her a helping hand. The two fell silent. After a long moment, Sean Bellamy muttered, in Port Sterling's financial world, I don't have any reliable friends either. Those banks are all trying to save their own skin right now. He hadn't even finished his sentence when Cassandra's eyes suddenly lit up. Sean, that friend of yours, Charlie, isn't he in investment banking? We had dinner with him once. At Elysian Media, inside the CEO's office, Ethan Vance had Isabel Thorne pinned against the wide, floor-to-ceiling window. With one hand, he held both of her wrists above her head, kissing her with an insatiable fervor. After being thoroughly taken advantage of for what felt like an eternity, Isabel finally managed to push him away, catching her breath. What's gotten into you this early in the morning? She said, a hint of exasperation in her voice. We're at the office. Ethan smirked. It's not my nerves. It's just primal urges. Isabel shot him a glare, the words slipping out before she could stop them. But just this morning She stopped herself after 3 words, her cheeks flushing a deep crimson. Ethan feigned ignorance. We what? Isabel was speechless. Ethan Vance, you've corrupted me. I swear on my life, it's human nature. I just taught you how to embrace it. Isabel didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So I should be thanking you? I'm your husband. Ethan said shamelessly. It's my duty and obligation. It's what I'm supposed to do. Don't feel guilty. With that, he lunged for her again like a starving wolf. Isabel, quick on the draw, cupped his approaching face in her hands, feigning annoyance. Behave yourself. Haven't you had enough? The great Soviet medical expert, Dar Vozisky, once said that kissing for half an hour every day brings women immense physical and mental pleasure. and even improves their skin, Ethan declared with mock seriousness. Therefore, I am engaging in an act of selfless devotion. It's all for your own good. You're so shameless, Isabel muttered. But in the end, she couldn't resist his brand of selfless devotion. The couple spent another few minutes wrapped up in each other before Ethan, finally satisfied, pulled his slightly swollen lips away. He cradled her face in his hands, his voice soft and intoxicating. Izzy, I really, really love you. Isabel's heart hammered in her chest. She lowered her head slightly, blushing. Stop being so cheesy. Go home. I have a mountain of work to do. Ethan pecked her on the forehead and pulled her into a tight embrace. After taking a deep breath, he said suddenly, Izzy, what if we want to live abroad? I have an island. It's beautiful. Isabel froze. She slowly looked up and saw that the expression on her husband's face was not a joking one. For a moment, the formidable CEO was at a loss. My money, Ethan continued, is probably more than we could spend in a lifetime. You don't have to worry about our lifestyle. As for your dad, once he's out, we can ask him what he wants. If he wants to stay in Port Sterling, Victor will make sure he's well taken care of. If he wants to be with us, I'll come get him. Isabel's face was a canvas of conflict. The truth was, she cared deeply about Elysian Media. The company's name was a combination of her mother's and her own, a gift from her father, Arthur Thorne, but more than that, a legacy. How could Ethan not know this? He pressed on. As for the company, we can hire a professional manager to run it. Or better yet, we could just hand it over to Victor. I'm sure he'd jump at the chance. You could step back, work from behind the scenes. And with travel being what it is today, you could come back for a visit whenever you wanted. Isabel hesitated, then finally looked at him. Honey, can you just let me think about it? Ethan smiled and nodded. Of course. I'm just asking for your opinion. He had mentioned it in passing before, but they had never discussed it so seriously. Now, faced with it so directly, Isabel felt it was all a bit sudden. After leaving the company, Ethan drove straight to Phoenix Crest Manor. As he arrived at Victor's courtyard, he saw his father escorting Deputy Mayor Tanner out of the reception hall. Don't you worry, Tanner was saying. Regarding Triumph Investments, I've made all the necessary calls. I even applied a little pressure to some people who wanted to stay out of it. The process will move quickly. All you'll have to do is have the money ready. As for anyone trying to compete with you, well, there's not much I can do about that. You'll have to rely on your own methods. Victor chuckled. Fair enough, fair enough. As long as your people at City Hall don't make any more trouble, no one will dare to compete with me. From their posture, Victor appeared almost subservient, while Tanner was the one projecting authority. It was as if Tanner's hysterical groveling and Victor's dismissive attitude from 2 days ago had never happened. As they reached the center of the courtyard, they saw Ethan standing at the entrance. Tanner gave a slight, smiling nod. Victor's smile widened, and with an obsequious expression, he hurried over. Well, son, why didn't you let me know you were coming? Ethan ignored him. After giving a polite nod to Tanner, he walked past them and into the reception hall. Victor saw Tanner to his car and then rushed back inside. Son, you miss your old man? Oh, my leg has been killing me lately. Hey, what are you looking for? Sit. Let me find you some good tea. Ethan glanced at his father's perpetually aching leg, pursed his lips, and said, I'll make it myself. You sit. Victor smiled benevolently and slowly sat down on the sofa, gently rubbing his knee. He had a pretty good idea why his son was here. In fact, he'd been expecting him. Just then, the beautiful secretary walked in, holding a tablet. Her head was down, and she didn't notice Ethan rummaging in the corner. She spoke without reservation. Chairman, Croft Consolidated has officially announced they're disbanding their performance troupe. The head director was taken in for questioning this morning. She's 26, has 7 villas in her name, and over $30 million in savings. It's likely she's in deep trouble. However, I've contacted their assistant director and sent her our recruitment plan. She said, Ahem. Victor had been trying to signal the secretary, but she hadn't looked up. In his panic, he could only cough to get her attention, but it was too late. In the corner, Ethan, who had just found a tin of premium Huangshan Malfone tea, spun around at the words recruitment plan. He glared at Victor. What are you doing? Taking over their stable of performers. The secretary finally saw her young master, and, knowing full well the chairman was afraid of his son, her heart skipped a beat. She shot Victor an apologetic look. Well, you see. Victor's smile was awkward. Ron Wallace loves to watch dancing, right? He's a public figure, so it's not easy for him. He asked me to help him recruit. Yes, it was him. That old bastard, so shameless, a disgrace to his age. I already gave him a piece of my mind. But, we've been brothers for a lifetime. A small favor like this, I might as well help him out. No, why are you looking at me like that? I don't like watching dancing. Not one bit. Ethan's lips curled into a humorless smile. You really are a helpful one. So selfless. Victor smiled, then turned a stern look on his secretary. You know what? Forget it. I'm not helping him with this. You can go back to your work. And don't recruit anyone. Not a single one. The secretary was speechless. I understand, Chairman. After making the tea, Ethan sat on the sofa opposite Victor, crossed his legs, and muttered, Take it easy, you old bastard. Victor, eager to change the subject, didn't reply. Ethan lit a cigarette and switched gears. Let's talk business. Why do you want to take over Apex Construction? Victor knew his son would ask this, and he also knew his son had already figured out his motive, so he didn't bother hiding it. Do you really have to leave? I'm on the verge of conquering this whole world. At my age, shouldn't I be enjoying life? As my only son, if this empire isn't yours, whose could it be? While you can still manage, why don't you have another kid? Ethan said flippantly. In any case, don't count on me. Victor pouted. If you won't think of me, think of Izzy. Will she be willing to just up and leave with you? I doubt you have the heart to force her. I'll figure something out, Ethan said, his tone resolute. You can give up on that idea right now. Victor was thoroughly exasperated. He was handing over this vast fortune, and his son was acting like he was being poisoned. It seemed he would have to find another way. Deciding to abandon his pleading, Victor took a step back. Fine, we'll talk about it later. But you still have to go to Apex, just once. Do it as a favor for me. Don't worry, you just need to show your face. After that, you'll never have to go back. Ethan reluctantly agreed. After a sip of tea, he asked casually, So, that Tanner guy is still on your side? Victor smiled faintly. I'm just using him. His days are numbered. Ethan froze for a second, then shot him a questioning look. Think about it, Victor explained. Mayor Cole just died, and the Red Tower puts Tanner, a fool with no brains and no ability, but with an old family to support and young kids to raise, in his place. What do you think their purpose was? Ethan grew thoughtful. So, from the very beginning, the Red Tower just wanted him to be a scapegoat. Victor nodded. Whether I meddled this time or not, Tanner's fate was sealed. Jonathan Croft was the stand-in, and sooner or later, the Red Tower's true master would have had to hand him over. And when that happens, if they don't drag a big tiger down with him, how are they going to fool Director Irons? Realization dawned on Ethan. He fell silent for a moment, then said, So, your meddling this time actually played right into the Red Tower's hands? Victor waved his hand dismissively. No. It's too soon. The Red Tower was definitely caught off guard. Besides, now the police and the media are all focused on them. Their true master probably didn't sleep a wink last night. Ethan's eyes flickered, and he asked abruptly, That man who jumped from the building, did you arrange that? I saw your bodyguard bring him to see you the day I was coming down the mountain. Victor pursed his lips and mused. People at the bottom love to talk about reason and fairness. His death wasn't my doing. Ethan's face twisted into a sneer. He shook his head. A desperate man, forced into a corner with no way out. And you? Ultimately, Victor said, the reason people are divided into different classes, aside from birth, is largely due to their different understandings of culture. Some people treat the story of Kong Rong yielding the pear as gospel, while others study the law of the wolf pack. Different seeds are sown, so different fruits are harvested, creating different social classes. To put it simply, if you want to start from nothing and claw your way up from the bottom, selflessness won't work. Talking about reason and fairness is even more useless. The greatest stories are almost always told by the wolves to the sheep, to keep them docile, to make them build their own prisons. Ethan's smile was cold. You know why I've never helped you with my whole heart? Victor Vance, sometimes you feel like a stranger to me. You even scare me. My cruelty is for clear grievances. It's on the surface. Your cruelty is in the marrow of your bones, completely without scruples. Since we're talking about cause and effect, aren't you afraid that the wicked deeds you sow will bring you a tragic harvest? Victor's smile was enigmatic. Life and death are not for man to decide, but between life and death, it's not up to heaven either. If heaven had eyes, would there still be evil men in this world? Besides, good and evil are defined by man. It has nothing to do with God. Father and son stared at each other for a few seconds. Ethan was the first to look away. He took a sip of tea and said coldly, Try to accumulate some good karma. Victor chuckled. Fair enough. In his eyes, his son was a perfectly suitable heir, except for his occasional soft-heartedness and bouts of compassion for the world. Furthermore, his understanding of the world was still a bit shallow. The higher you climbed the social ladder, the fewer vegetarians you'd find. At the very top, it was a world where men ate men. There was no room for a bleeding heart. So whenever he had the chance, he would try to instill his own twisted philosophy in Ethan. But Ethan, it seemed, never accepted it, always treating it with contempt. When two people can't see eye to eye, even a single word is too many. Ethan lost all interest in continuing the conversation. He told his father to take care of his leg and warned him not to get any more ideas about him, then left for the cells Victor had prepared for the 3 Celestial Axis members. The Joker had now been tamed by Dr. Holloway into an exceedingly obedient dog. With the tendons in his hands and feet severed, he moved by crawling forward slowly, like a maggot. Ethan didn't enter the room, but stood outside, looking coldly through the glass panel on the door. Dr. Holloway caught a glimpse of him out of the corner of his eye and put even more effort into his work. He unhooked the leash and threw a ping-pong ball with force. The Joker, his tongue lolling out, scrambled across the room after the ball. After retrieving it in his mouth, he would crawl back to Dr. Holloway, panting, seeking praise. Although the torture the Joker had inflicted on him 10 years ago was far more painful than this, and though he had fantasized countless times about repaying it 100-fold, seeing the scene before him, Ethan felt a sour mix of emotions, with no sense of vengeful satisfaction at all. After watching silently for a while, Ethan took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Dr. Holloway, if he has no more use, let him die. Without waiting for a response, Ethan walked to the next room. Inside, Pig Mask was covered in blood. It looked like he had just been cut again. His entire back was festering, and he lacked even the strength to groan in pain. Ethan's expression was impassive as he glanced over and moved to the last room. White Fox was sipping milk in small mouthfuls. When she saw Ethan appear at the door, she showed a clear flicker of excitement, but quickly lowered her head and continued to drink her milk in silence. From her clean clothes and face, it was clear that Victor hadn't harmed her. But to watch the man she loved suffer every day and still hold on, Dr. Holloway must have given her a psychology lesson as well. Ethan slowly entered the room and stared at her, his voice grim. Same question. Back then, why didn't the Celestial Axis kill me? White Fox looked up at him, her gaze complex. After a moment, she shook her head, her lips pressed tightly together. Ethan's gaze didn't waver. It only grew colder. White Fox started to tremble, a shiver running through her entire body. She shook her head again. I really don't know anything else. I've told you everything I know. Ethan didn't press her further. He was just too curious about this one point that made no sense. But the truth was not far off. He could wait. Nearing noon, at Apex Construction, Cassandra Vance was once again raging in the conference room. All morning, the people she had sent out to negotiate loans with the major banks and financial institutions had all hit a brick wall. In the end, all the major banks were in a state of panic due to the earthquake triggered by Croft Consolidated. Apex was deeply entangled with the Crofts, so who would dare lend her money? Forget the legitimate channels. Even the loan sharks probably wouldn't dare to touch this. After venting her anger, Cassandra packed her bag and hurried downstairs. Sean Bellamy was already waiting in the car. They had an appointment to have lunch with Charlie. As soon as she got in the car, Cassandra started complaining. Such a big company and not a single competent person. They're all just parasites, feeding off the company. Sean started the car, frowning. You couldn't borrow a single penny? Cassandra, only by mortgaging assets. But I can't mortgage too much, or those directors will realize my father isn't backing me anymore. The initial assessment is that the assets I've put up can probably secure a loan of about $200 million. As for anything else, the banks won't even discuss it. $200 million? That's nowhere near enough. It won't even cover the expenses of the other projects. Sean was frantic. Cassandra sighed and looked at him. Sean, you're close with this Charlie. Do you think he'll help us? He'll definitely help. Sean said, it's hard to say how much. Chairwoman, I will do my absolute best. I believe he'll do it as a favor to me. Cassandra sighed again. In a time of crisis, the only ones I can rely on are you and old Jew. That evening, at Phoenix Crest Manor, inside the Eyrie, Harrison Vance supported his grandfather as they walked slowly through the courtyard. Grandfather, you're looking more and more spry, Harrison said with a pleased smile. Theodore Vance leaned on a cane with his other hand, his body slightly stooped, his breathing a little heavy. At this age, how much more spry can I get? Huh. He gradually came to a stop, took a breath, and looked at his eldest grandson. You were just saying that your aunt sold off a portion of her shares. Harrison nodded. Yes. I don't know the exact details, only that she and that Sean Bellamy fellow met with someone at noon. A friend of Bellamy's, apparently. An American investor who recently set up an investment firm in Port Sterling. I think it's called Jiayuan or something. The old man smiled and shook his head, then started walking again. How much equity does she still hold? Harrison replied, 31%. Theodore sighed. She doesn't even have a one-vote veto on major decisions anymore. How could she be so foolish? Isn't she afraid those directors will kick her out? Apex Construction is under attack from all sides, and their stock price is in the toilet, Harrison said. To save the overseas project, she had to bleed. However, Sean Bellamy still holds 4% of the shares. The two of them are joined at the hip, so when it comes to a critical moment, they can still control most of the company's power. Also, her old shareholders seem very dissatisfied with her right now. Bringing in a new shareholder is probably part of a plan to reshuffle the deck. The grandfather and grandson both knew the truth of the matter. There was no need to spell it out. Theodore's eyes were a mixture of resignation, pity, and a certain helplessness. His daughter was truly useless mud that couldn't be plastered onto a wall. Your uncle once said that in this world, anything involving people is unreliable. That is a businessman's most basic realization, Theodore said. But look at your aunt. She insists on going against this fundamental principle, always pinning her hopes on others. In the end, it was I who spoiled her too much, letting her develop this bad habit of always relying on a stroke of luck or someone else to save her. Huh, Harrison, these are living, breathing examples. You must remember them. In the long road ahead, even with those closest to you, you must maintain a degree of suspicion. I'll remember, grandfather. Though it was a warning, Theodore knew that his eldest grandson's suspicious nature needed no encouragement from him. All right, help me back to my room. You go handle your own affairs. I received news that Tanner is now doing everything he can to help your uncle. Triumph Investments is a major problem right now. In short, you need to root out all the moles in the company as soon as possible. Yes, I know, grandfather. After returning to the room, Harrison carefully helped his grandfather into bed, offered a few words of concern, and then left quickly. Outside the courtyard gate, Chase was slouched over, a cigarette dangling from his lips as he patted himself down, searching for a lighter. Just then, Dr. Linus Hayes' car sped up and parked behind his. Seeing Linus get out, Chase's eyes lit up, and he immediately walked over. Hey, Dr. Hayes. Linus gave him a brief glance, then leaned over and retrieved his medical bag from the passenger seat. He walked toward the courtyard gate with a leisurely pace, completely ignoring him. You've been moonlighting again? Chase said with a grin, trotting alongside him. Linus gave a soft MMPH of acknowledgement, not breaking his stride. What is it? It's important. A matter of life and death. Chase paused dramatically. Do you actually like Eva or not? Linus stopped and looked at him coldly. She's out of my league. Chase, then you should just tell her that. Let her give up, give me a chance. A rare look of mockery appeared in Linus's eyes. You're worthy? Chase wasn't offended. He pointed at Linus. You're looking down on me, aren't you? I just don't get it. Why are you doctor types so popular? Hey, don't walk away. Tell me, what does she even like about you? I could try to copy it. Hey, if you've got a problem with your brain, I don't mind treating you for free, Linus said flatly, stopping again. Chase pouted. Not explicitly rejecting someone's love for you is basically leading them on. If you're a man, be decisive. Don't hog the toilet if you're not going to take a shit. Linus's expression didn't change. Fine. I'll tell her you said she's a toilet and that you want to take a shit on her. Chase was speechless. Hey, it was just an example. Do you want that Spitfire to kill me? Just as he was speaking, Harrison Van strode over. Chase quickly shut his mouth. What are you two talking about? Harrison asked, puzzled. Chase, nothing. Linus, he wants to hit on Eva. With that, he walked away nonchalantly, leaving Chase twisting in the wind. Harrison stared at him, a half-smile playing on his lips. You've got some nerve, making a move on my sister. Chase scratched his head and gave a sheepish grin. This is an age of free love. Besides, she doesn't want to be some high society princess. A lawyer and a cop. It's a match made in heaven. True, Harrison said seriously. I'll arrange to have her out for dinner sometime. And then I'll tell her you used my membership card to go learn English at the Red Tower. The statute of limitations for soliciting prostitution is 6 months. You can give her your statement while you're hitting on her. Chase was speechless. Harrison continued. Not enough? Then I'll tell her you have 5 or 6 guns hidden at home, and that you've killed more people than you can count on both hands. Enough. What? From the look on your face, you don't want to hit on her anymore. I think, Chase said, defeated, she's out of my league. Harrison smiled. You need to know your limits. Among the Vance girls, Eva is the most outstanding. Don't even think about it. Chase felt a wave of frustration. He couldn't even get past the older brother, let alone Eva's tiger of a father and wolf of a younger brother. The two walked toward their cars. Halfway there, Harrison's phone rang. Speak, mister. Vance, I just found that in May and June, there were some discrepancies in the company's accounts. About 40 million in total. Can you find out who moved it? I need higher clearance. Harrison thought for a moment. Keep digging. And be careful not to get caught. Hanging up, Harrison grew pensive. The only people who could tamper with the headquarters accounts were his 3 elders. But to take such a huge risk for just over 40 million. What for? Nothing significant had happened with the Vances in May or June. First, Cassandra was obviously out of the question. If she needed money, she'd go directly to Theodore. She wouldn't need to be sneaky. Second, Victor probably wouldn't do something like this either. If he really needed 40 million, he could get it just by asking. That left Walter Vance. A surge of anger flared in Harrison's heart. His greedy old man was truly shameless. In the bedroom, Theodore Vance's eyes were half closed, his expression thoughtful. Suddenly, a pair of small hands grasped his feet. The old man startled, sitting up abruptly. "Grandpa, I'm playing hide-and-seek with you. How come you never found me?" I fell asleep under the bed. Lucy Vance looked like she had just woken up, her voice full of grievance. Theodore stared for a moment, and then the grim lines on his old face softened into a smile. "Come here, you little rascal. When did you run onto my bed?" Lucy climbed onto the bed and snuggled into his arms. "This afternoon. I came in and saw you were sleeping, so I wanted you to find me when you woke up." Theodore was exasperated. "You didn't even tell me, Grandpa. How was I supposed to know you were playing hide-and-seek? Don't do this again." The maid, hearing their voices, hurried in. Seeing Lucy, she was surprised. The little girl must have snuck in while she was in the bathroom. As Theodore's personal attendant, in reality, his personal bodyguard, she felt a pang of guilt. If an assassin had come in, the consequences would have been unthinkable. Theodore comforted Lucy for a bit, then handed her to the maid. "Take her to play, and be more careful from now on. Don't let this happen again. You nearly scared this old man to death." The maid bowed apologetically, then carried Lucy out of the room. At the same time, Dr. Linus Hayes knocked and entered, carrying his medical bag. "Mr. Vance, it's time for your checkup." Theodore nodded and gently extended his hand. Linus took his pulse, his face unreadable. A moment later, he took out a pen and paper and began to take notes. Theodore took a breath and asked suddenly, "Has Victor been asking you about my condition again?" Linus seemed very calm. "He asked once a few days ago. I just gave him a vague answer." Theodore considered this. "My son, he went to great lengths to buy you off, just to keep tabs on my health, so he could make his plans in advance." "Huh. Tell me, does this sound like a family? He really can't wait for me to die, can he?" Linus remained silent, finishing his notes. Only then did he speak. "Your condition is very stable. It's improved a lot from a while ago. Theodore, if he asks again, tell him my health is getting worse by the day. I like to see what preparations he makes." Linus nodded, saying nothing. In truth, on the day Victor had threatened and bribed him, he had told Theodore everything. The reason was simple. Theodore was the one signing his paychecks, and he had no desire to get involved in the family's power struggles. "Mr. Vance, you should rest. I'll be returning to my room," Linus said, standing up. But before he could take a step, he heard Theodore say, "Linus, would you be interested in telling me about your past?" Linus froze, his brow furrowing slightly. "Mr. Vance, you don't need to mistrust me. I'm just a doctor, and I only do what's in my job description. If Victor's attempt to bribe me has made you uncomfortable, I can leave." Theodore chuckled. "Where did you get that idea? If I didn't trust you, would I entrust my life to you? I just want to get to know you better. You know, my dear granddaughter has a special place in her heart for you. As her grandfather, I have to do some vetting, don't I?" Linus looked troubled. "Mr. Vance, thank you for the high praise, but I am truly not worthy. You should rest. I'll be going now." At the federal building, Director Quentin Irons was having dinner with his secretary, Mr. Evans. Next to their takeout boxes were several photos of Deputy Mayor Tanner entering and exiting the Red Tower. "Director, this Tanner fellow is very close to the Red Tower. The moment Mayor Cole died, the deputy was dropped from his title. But I've looked at his political record. Frankly, it's a disaster. He has no real ability." Iron swallowed a mouthful of food and smiled slowly. "Comrade Tanner also proposed today that we hold an anti-corruption conference. Why don't you go and listen in?" Mr. Evans couldn't help but chuckle. "All right, I'll go and listen to what kind of sermon this turtle can preach." Just then, a member of the task force knocked and entered. "Director, Jonathan Croft says he wants to see you." Irons thought for a moment, then put down his half-eaten dinner and strode out of the office. Seeing Croft, the special envoy from D.C., smiled, a hint of amusement in his eyes as he sat down opposite him. "So, decided to say something. Croft's face was ashen. He nodded slightly and got straight to the point. My downfall. It was all Victor Vance's doing, wasn't it? Irons said nothing, just stared at him intently. Croft took a breath. Director Irons, do you know why my family and the Vances are at odds? Irons still didn't speak. Croft continued. Victor Vance's son stabbed my son several times, 2 nights before my son was murdered. Irons's eyes flickered. What are you trying to say? Croft, he had a conflict with my son over the development zone project. But someone didn't want Victor Vance to get that project, and I couldn't do anything about it. Irons grew pensive. In my safe at home, Croft said grimly, there's a carving knife. It has Ethan Vance's fingerprints on it, and my son's blood. Is that enough for you to make an arrest? Irons, I can pass your information on to the police. But that's not what I want to hear. Croft let out a cold laugh. For now, that's all I want to say. Director Irons, the waters in Port Sterling run very deep. If you don't even dare to touch the Vances, what else can I say? A little reminder for you. When Ethan Vance stabbed my son, there were many people there. Perhaps. A few of them might be of great interest to you. All right. I'm suddenly feeling a bit dizzy. I don't want to talk anymore. Irons stared at him for a while, then got up and returned to his office. Mr. Evans, learning that Croft had inexplicably brought up Ethan Vance, was disappointed. That old bastard is just trying to piss off Victor Vance. Irons thought for a long time. Regardless, have the police get the evidence first. Once they have it, bring the man in for questioning. We'll see what he says. At 8:30 p.m., Ethan Vance was summoned to the detective squad. An hour later, Irons went to see Croft again. The moment he entered, he was furious. 2 nights before your son was murdered, Ethan Vance was at the hospital. The security footage proves he never left. Croft's brow furrowed. You let him go? You didn't get anything out of him? Irons, that knife was only used by him when he was dining at the Red Tower. As for your son's blood, he's adamant he knows nothing. On the other hand, you go to the Red Tower almost every day. It wouldn't have been hard for you to get that knife. Jonathan Croft, what the hell are you? He stopped mid-sentence, suddenly freezing. Croft's brow had inexplicably relaxed. In an instant, he was perfectly calm. Who are you sending a signal to? The belated realization sent a surge of fury through Irons. So intense, he felt his lungs would explode. Croft slowly shook his head. I don't know what you're talking about. Director Irons, I have a headache. I need to rest. Irons ground his teeth, his voice seething. Fine. I'll make sure you get plenty of rest. Bring in the lights. In truth, by luring Irons in and providing the wrong time for his son's stabbing, by running him around in such a large circle, Jonathan Croft was simply trying to remind Ruffong of one thing. Ethan Vance must die. At the same time, the gentleman, Ruffong, hidden away in his suburban estate, also received the news of Ethan's summons. Sienna Sterling was gently massaging his shoulders, her face etched with worry. This Jonathan Croft, to avenge his son, he's willing to disregard the rest of his family. Ruffing mused, the task force is watching him too closely. I've tried, but there's no way to communicate with him. So we just let him threaten us like this? Sienna said, that old bastard, he's betting that we won't dare to call his bluff. Ruffing sighed. He mentioned the 2 days time frame. It means that 2 days from now, he'll find another way to confirm whether Ethan Vance is dead or alive. If we can't keep his mouth shut by then, Port Sterling will be turned upside down. Sienna seemed to want to argue further. If things get turned upside down, it'll be City Hall that gets it first. Those protégés of yours, aren't they going to do something? Ruffin gave a bitter laugh. The highest-ranking one is just a mid-level official. You expect him to challenge a special envoy from D. See? Sienna thought for a moment, then gritted her teeth. Why don't we have the foreigner make his move early? If we do that, Ruffing said, then Jonathan Croft's role as a scapegoat becomes completely meaningless. It's not the right time. Sienna understood. It wasn't that it wasn't the right time. It was that there was a better solution. Killing Ethan Vance was a much more cost-effective option than killing Director Irons. Ruffin glanced at her and, seeing the dimness in her eyes, changed the subject. Yeah, I'll say it again. Leave and leave soon. The police are already watching you very closely. Sienna remained silent. She shifted her position and began to gently massage Ruffing's legs. Your new passport will be here in a couple of days, he continued. Go to Vancouver first. I've already made arrangements there. Then, change your identity and go to Paris. Then change it again and go to London. Remember that estate in London? I took you there once. No one knows about it. You can settle down there peacefully. At this, Sienna looked up at him, interrupting, why don't you come with me? Ruffing frowned. If I don't clean up this mess, even if I escape to the ends of the earth, the powers in the capital will find me. Sienna bit her lip and murmured, do you really have to kill him? Ruffong reached out and caressed her cheek, his voice gentle. Please don't get involved in this anymore. I have my own plans. All right, it's getting late. Go back to your room and rest. Sienna looked like she wanted to say more, but she silently got off the bed. After staring at Ruffong for a moment with a complex expression, she left the room, looking lost. Back in her own room, Sienna held her phone, her heart warring with itself. After a long struggle, she finally called Ethan. Hello. The moment she heard Ethan's voice, a smile bloomed on Sienna's face. She teased, Big brother Ethan, did you miss me? Ethan was silent for a moment. You haven't left yet? Sienna's smile widened. She answered with a question of her own. I heard you were summoned by the police tonight. Sienna laughed for a bit. That old bastard Jonathan Croft is probably just trying to annoy you, but you should still be careful these next couple of days. His other godson, Brody, hasn't been caught yet. I heard a rumor that he's gathering people to get revenge on you and your father. Ethan grunted in acknowledgement. It's fine. Sienna, I think you should take it seriously. After all, it's hard to guard against a petty man. Why don't you just stay at Phoenix Crest Manor for the next 2 days? Ethan grew suspicious. What do you know? Why are you always so suspicious of me? Sienna said with a pout. Sigh, I told you, Brody wants to get revenge on you. Ethan didn't reply. Croft's stunt tonight had already felt strange. Now, Sienna was warning him of danger. What was she trying to hint at? Before he could think further, he heard her say, Big brother Ethan, you have to be careful. Oh, by the way, that person you mentioned before, the one with the missing toe, I'm still looking into it. If I find anything, I'll let you know right away. That's all. I'm still busy. I'll hang up now. After hanging up, tears welled up in Sienna's eyes. She collapsed onto the sofa, limp as if crushed by an invisible, heavy stone, struggling to breathe. In the other room, Ruffong was also holding his phone. On the screen, a prompt from his spyware asked, Save recording? His expression was grim. He glanced at his own left foot, missing a toe, and frowned. He then took a recording pen from under his pillow, pressed play, and sent a text to his bodyguard. Come to my room. The recording pen played back everything Sienna had said over the past few days, a full range of her tones and emotions. A moment later, the bodyguard knocked and entered. Ruffing tossed him the recording pen. Proceed according to the plan, he said, his voice low and serious. Remember, pay attention to every detail. Don't let that kid suspect a thing. The next day, at Apex Construction, Cassandra Vance called a board meeting first thing in the morning. Gentlemen, I have some good news to announce. The urgent crisis with the overseas project. I've solved it. She smiled and glanced at Sean Bellamy. Thanks to Sean's connections, I was able to raise $250 million yesterday. That money is enough to handle the current situation. The board members exchanged glances, but no one responded. Cassandra paid no mind to their strange reactions. She was used to it. Whenever Sean accomplished something, these old fossils looked like they just swallowed a fly. She continued, Of course, this money didn't just fall out of the sky. I traded my equity for it. But that being said, for someone to have faith in Apex Construction and choose to invest at a time like this is a tremendous kindness. Now, allow me to formally introduce our new shareholder, Charlie. With that, Cassandra looked toward the conference room door. The secretary at the door immediately pulled it open. Everyone turned to look. However, after 3 or 4 seconds, no one had entered. Cassandra shot a questioning glance at Sean Bellamy, then called out again, Charlie, you can come in. Still no movement at the door. The secretary looked puzzled, peeked her head out to check, and then froze in place. The board members turned back, exchanging glances again. The old director who had previously challenged Cassandra lowered his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. Cassandra, who had been waiting expectantly, frowned and shot a look at Sean Bellamy, a clear go and see in her eyes. Sean nodded gently. He had just stood up and taken a few steps when a large group of security guards suddenly swarmed into the conference room, lining up in 2 rows against the walls. Cassandra was baffled. She looked around at the guards who had just rushed in and was about to speak when another person walked in from outside the conference room door. The next second, the directors seated on both sides of the table shot to their feet as one, each standing with military precision. Cassandra stared at the entrance, her jaw dropping in disbelief. The newcomer was none other than her own dear nephew, Ethan Vance. After entering, Ethan glanced at his aunt and gave a playful wink. Then, he casually pulled out a chair and sat down with a roguish slouch. Finn stood behind him, his face impassive as he scanned the room. Cassandra glared at Ethan, her eyes filled with a venomous fury. A moment later, she turned to the respectfully standing directors and let out a cold laugh. So that's it. It was you pack of backstabbing dogs, scheming behind my back. What did Victor promise you to make you all betray me like this? The old director who had confronted her before sneered. Cassandra, have you ever stopped to reflect on yourself? Siding with a sycophant, making enemies of us day after day. Look at what you've done to this company. You've alienated everyone. This is all your own doing. Cassandra's cold laugh continued. You pack of dogs. You want to stage a rebellion? You're not even qualified. She then turned her glare on Ethan. You little bastard. You're not even old enough to grow a full beard, and you dare to cause trouble here. Call your father. Tell him to come here himself. I'd like to see how he plans to seize my power today. Ethan was holding his phone, flirting with his wife via text message. He answered carelessly. I didn't want to come either. Victor was the one who insisted I come and watch the show. If you want him here, call him yourself. Cassandra tried to force herself to calm down and think clearly, but her domineering nature was impossible to suppress. Instead of analyzing the bizarre situation, her mind filled with a torrent of insults. Besides, she wasn't truly panicked. These directors held a small percentage of shares, and she had already planned to kick them out anyway. The combined shares of herself, Sean Bellamy, Charlie, and Mr. Zhu were over 51%. She still had controlling interest in the company. Victor wanted to seize power? A fool's dream. Just as she was about to erupt, Mr. Zhu, the same Mr. Zhu had supposedly gone overseas yesterday, walked in with confident strides. Cassandra was completely stunned. Zhu, old Zhu, you, Mr. Zhu didn't even look at her. He walked to Ethan's side and gave a slight nod. Young master, there was some traffic. I'm late. Ethan gave a casual reply. Sit. He then looked up at the other directors. You all can sit too. Why are you standing? Cassandra's face was a mask of disbelief. Mr. Zhu was a founding general of Apex Construction. In a way, Apex was his life's work. This old colleague had followed her loyally for decades, and now, he too had betrayed her. What she couldn't understand, even more, was that Mr. Zhu had clearly not gone overseas. Just last night, a project manager from the overseas site had told her he had been met by Mr. Zhu. Treason. It's all treason. Cassandra's face was contorted with rage. She pointed a trembling finger at Mr. Zhu. You with the surname Zhu, do you know what you're doing? How could you do this to me? How could you do this to Apex? Mr. Zhu closed his eyes, his expression cold as he looked at her. Cassandra, it's over. It's all over. Don't make this any more undignified for yourself. Dignity? You traitorous dog. You have the nerve to speak of dignity. Cassandra cursed. And I thought of you as a person. You're nothing but a spineless dog. Worse than an animal. Mr. Zhu's heart felt like dead ashes. He sighed slowly. To have come to this, I was forced. I couldn't just stand by and watch Apex be destroyed. Just like you couldn't bring yourself to fire Sean Bellamy, despite all the opposition. We each have something we must protect. Cut the crap. Cassandra gritted her teeth. Even now, you're still trying to blame Sean. He rooted out the company's parasites for me. Was that wrong? Or are you all just leeches, afraid he'd expose you? Mr. Zhu took a deep breath. Open your eyes and look around. In this world, is there any other public company that is managed the way you do? Getting rid of corruption isn't wrong, but you use the wrong methods. You don't even understand the most basic human decency. You just don't get it. He pointed at the other directors. Do you think they were born rebels? Huh? I pleaded with you, and you didn't listen to a single word. Do you know how disappointed you've made them? In the end, you forced them to rebel. Even at this point, Cassandra still hadn't realized her own mistakes. Her heart and mind were filled with nothing but resentment for these directors. Traitors. Dogs. You will all die a horrible death. Just as the words left her mouth, Charlie, dressed in a sharp British suit, walked in gracefully. He glanced at the crowd, his eyes finally landing on Cassandra. Hi, Chairwoman Vance. It's quite lively in here. Seeing Charlie, Cassandra swallowed the curses that were on the tip of her tongue. Out of her trust for Sean Bellamy, she also held a great deal of trust for his sworn brother. However, Cassandra had intended to greet him warmly and explain the situation, but she had only said 2 words when she saw the foreigner stop beside Ethan and greet him with a smile. Mr. Vance, I just had to use the restroom. Then, Charlie looked up at Cassandra. Chairwoman Vance, allow me to introduce you. Ethan Vance is the big boss of our Jiayuan investments. You must know him well, right? Me, I just work for him. The money to buy your shares. It was all his. Cassandra felt as if she'd been struck by lightning. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and Sean Bellamy quickly steadied her. Chairwoman, are you all right? Cassandra nearly choked. After a long moment, she finally stood firm, glaring at Charlie. You're all in this together. Charlie shrugged, feigning ignorance. What do you mean? I'm just introducing you to my boss. After all, he's your shareholder. I'm just an employee. Cassandra clutched her chest, her face contorted in a terrifying grimace. Sean Bellamy supported her with one hand and pointed an accusatory finger at Charlie with the other. Charlie, you've ruined me. Cassandra, already blinded by rage and unable to think logically, clung tightly to Sean Bellamy's hand. Her eyes were fixed on the traitors before her as she said to him, Sean, it's not your fault. Victor must have found out that Charlie bought my shares and threatened him into this last night. Don't be afraid. Our combined shares are still 35%. We have a one-vote veto. I will never let Victor Vance set foot on this board. Sean Bellamy gritted his teeth and took a step toward Charlie. Halfway there, the furious expression on his face suddenly changed. An inexplicable smile spread across his lips, and he turned to look at Cassandra. Chairwoman, I'm sorry. I think I broke character. You see, he said, pointing at Ethan, I was actually his father's man all along, even before I joined Apex. Ha ha. Watching Sean Bellamy slap his thigh and laugh hysterically, Cassandra's eyes trembled, her face devoid of any expression. In truth, she had already realized that Sean was probably also a problem, but her own stubbornness had blinded her, making her cling to the flimsy excuse that Victor had bribed Charlie just to deceive herself. She had been arrogant and domineering her whole life, only to be brought down by the one she had treated with the most gentleness. Ethan put away his phone. Seeing his aunt looking as if she had lost her soul, he felt a mix of emotions. If the old hag had thrown a tantrum, he would have found it normal and wouldn't have been bothered. But no matter what, the job had to be done. Annie, the board has voted to support me. They've unanimously agreed to remove you as chairwoman. You're 3 percentage points short of a veto. Why don't you ask the directors present if any of them will be merciful enough to give you some of theirs? Ha ha! Laughter erupted from the crowd. Only Mr. Zhu's face remained grim. Cassandra paid no attention to Ethan's words. Her eyes were vacant, still fixed on Sean Bellamy. Ethan pursed his lips. Annie, while there's still time, take your son and daughter and leave. I'll liquidate your remaining shares for you. Remember, don't go back to the manor. Victor probably won't give you a chance to leave. And grandfather, he can't protect you either. He then looked at the security guards beside Cassandra. Escort Chairwoman Vance. He had barely finished when Cassandra's eyes glazed over. She fainted, falling straight forward. Her head struck the corner of the table, and blood immediately began to flow. The guards' first instinct was to rush forward, but now that Apex had a new master, they hesitated. After a moment of thought, none of them dared to move, instead stealing glances at Ethan. Sean Bellamy was unconcerned, a hint of mockery in his eyes. The other directors exchanged their usual glances. Only Mr. Zhu rushed to Cassandra's side, lifted her up, and ran out frantically. Call an ambulance. Ethan watched it all unfold. In this room full of traitors, Mr. Zhu was the only one he could still look upon with a measure of respect. Mr. Vance. No, I should call you Chairman Vance now. Ha! Sean Bellamy was back to his smooth, sycophantic self. The other directors quickly chimed in with their congratulations. Ethan's gaze swept over their faces, his tone lukewarm. All of you out? Charlie and Sean Bellamy, you stay. Seeing that Ethan wasn't particularly happy, the directors were puzzled but didn't dare to ask questions. They bowed and scraped their way out of the conference room, the guards following close behind. Sean Bellamy, who had been an undercover agent for years, assumed Ethan was about to reward him handsomely. His expression grew even more ecstatic, his flattery reaching new heights. Ethan ignored him. He glanced at Finn, then asked Charlie, "How long have you been with Victor?" Finn, understanding the signal, left the conference room. A moment later, he returned with a large leather suitcase. After closing all the curtains, he opened the suitcase, took out a roll of plastic sheeting, and began to spread it on the floor. Sean Bellamy, ever eager to please, immediately squatted down to help. 3 years, Charlie replied to Ethan. Actually, the chairman originally planned for me to sabotage Cassandra on the overseas project, but things changed, so he had me come here to work. The effect is the same. Ethan smiled. That old bastard. He never intended to let go of the overseas project after all. All right, you can go now. Charlie acknowledged with a nod and respectfully exited the room. On the other side of the room, Finn and Sean Bellamy had finished laying out the plastic. Sean Bellamy, Ethan said, "You seem very happy today." Sean, like an eager puppy, grinned. Finally helped the chairman get rid of a stumbling block. "I'm happy from the bottom of my heart." Ha! Also, today is a day for celebration. Congratulations to you on becoming the new chairman of Apex. He was cut off by Ethan. "You shouldn't be happy." Sean froze. As he was trying to figure out if he had misjudged his flattery, a curved blade suddenly pierced his temple. At the same time, Finn, who was behind him, clamped a hand over his mouth and whispered, "Relax. Right here, it doesn't hurt much. And there won't be as much blood. Relax, relax." Sean's body went rigid. His eyes, wide with shock, stared at Ethan. He truly, probably, had no idea why he was dying. "You don't deserve to live," Ethan said calmly. He paused, then added Victor's words. With that, Ethan turned and walked away with a casual air. Finn silently laid Sean Bellamy down on the plastic sheeting. After lunch, Ethan drove to Phoenix Crest Manor. Inside, Victor was hosting several honored guests, Deputy Mayor Tanner's entire family, though Tanner himself was not among them. In fact, under pressure from multiple departments, Tanner had been in meetings at the development zone since early morning. In the afternoon, he had to return to City Hall for the anti-corruption conference. His day was packed, and he had no idea Victor was entertaining his family. After the meal, Tanner's parents were taken by a maid for a walk by the lake. Mrs. Tanner, meanwhile, was enjoying tea with Victor in the courtyard pavilion. "Victor, you've really gone to too much trouble today," Mrs. Tanner said, her over-decorated, serpent-like face arranged in a faint smile. "I was planning to go straight to the airport this afternoon. You're so busy, I really shouldn't have bothered you." Victor waved his hand dismissively. "I heard from the deputy mayor a few days ago that your parents wanted to visit Phoenix Crest Manor, especially your father. He loves antiques and wanted to see the old collection here. I happen to be free today, so of course, I have to help the deputy mayor fulfill his filial duties. The flight is at 4 this afternoon, so there's still plenty of time." If Tanner was insatiably greedy, his family was a major reason for it. His father loved antiques. Over the years, Victor alone had given him no less than 10 pieces, valued at over 200 million. His wife loved beauty, forgetting the clothes and bags. The Korean renovation fees Victor had spent on her face alone amounted to over 8 million. His daughter was a good-for-nothing who couldn't even graduate high school, yet Victor had arranged for her to study in Vancouver at an annual cost of no less than 5 million. In the end, Tanner's only real vice was lust. It was his family that made him a glutton for all 7 deadly sins. If the Red Tower hadn't needed his head for another purpose, how could a man like this have survived so long? In other words, it was precisely because of his family's brainless nature that the Red Tower had chosen Tanner to be their scapegoat. "Victor, you're so thoughtful. I really don't know how to thank you," Mrs. Tanner said with a demure smile, her eyes full of meaning. Victor met her gaze and felt a shiver run down his spine. He quickly looked away. "The deputy mayor is like a brother to me. He's busy with official duties, so it's only right that I help take care of his family. It's what I should do." Mrs. Tanner's affection only grew. She suddenly sighed. "Old Tanner is always so busy he's never home. I barely see him a few times a month." Sigh. "Victor, thank goodness I have you to think of us. You've helped us so much, and now you've even arranged for us to travel abroad." As she spoke, Mrs. Tanner intentionally placed her hand on Victor's. Victor, a man who had navigated a sea of flowers his entire life, now felt like a celibate monk. He snatched his hand back as if he'd been electrocuted. But out of courtesy, and also because of his objective for the day, he couldn't say anything. He just gave a dry laugh. "It's what I should do, what I should do. I was just thinking your daughter is busy with her studies in Vancouver. She didn't even come back for the holidays last year. It's a good chance for you all to reunite." A blush crept onto Mrs. Tanner's cheeks. With a look that said, "I've got you," she slowly stood up and walked toward Victor. Victor remained still, but in his mind, he was screaming, "Don't you come over here." In his panic, he caught a glimpse of Ethan leaning against the courtyard gate, doubled over with laughter. In that instant, he saw a lifeline. He shot to his feet and called out, "Son, quick, quick, come over. Let me introduce you. This is Deputy Mayor Tanner's wife. Quick, come and say hello." "Hey, where are you going, you brat? Such bad manners. Get over here right now." Ethan, who had taken a step to leave, probably couldn't bear it. He lowered his head, suppressing his laughter, took a deep breath, and only then walked back toward the pavilion. For the first time in a long while, he greeted Mrs. Tanner with impeccable manners. Mrs. Tanner's eyes showed a hint of disappointment, but she still managed to smile. "I often hear from old Tanner that your son is a man of great style and talent. Seeing him today, he truly is extraordinary." Ethan didn't speak. He was afraid he'd start laughing. Victor and Mrs. Tanner exchanged a few more compliments. After sitting down and having a few sips of tea, Mrs. Tanner, seeing that there was no more meat on the table, said she was going to join her in-laws and stood up to leave. How could Victor dare to ask her to stay? He smiled cheerfully. Madam, please enjoy the scenery. When it's time, I'll have my driver take you to the airport. Once you get to Vancouver, stay for a while. I've already arranged for people to meet you there. You can stay in my villa. Use anything inside as if it were your own home. There are also a few bank cards. Feel free to use them. The drivers and bodyguards are also at your disposal. If they don't listen, just let me know. Mrs. Tanner thanked him and left. Watching her walk out of the courtyard, Victor slumped onto the stone bench and quickly drank some tea to calm his nerves. Beside him, Ethan couldn't stop laughing. Hey, you're an equal opportunity charmer, huh? To be fair, Victor's charisma was still quite potent. That old monster is probably going to give me nightmares. I mean, I want her husband's life, and she's after my body. It's an outrage, an absolute outrage, Victor said with a pained expression. Ethan reined in his laughter and sat down, pouring himself a cup of tea. You're using his family as hostages. Is Tanner not cooperating again? Victor waved his hand. He's cooperating, but he has to die. I can't let the Red Tower hand him over. Ethan could easily guess the reason. The Triumph Investments deal is being handled by him. If he's handed over, your plan to acquire Triumph will be jeopardized, right? Victor mused. Although it's unlikely he'd rat me out, what if? Dead men are more reliable. Ethan took a sip of tea. You can just take care of him yourself. Victor smiled. There you go again. Have you forgotten? I keep telling you, a businessman's hands cannot be stained with the blood of an official. Why did Director Irons come all the way to Port Sterling and latch onto the Red Tower? Wasn't it because the Red Tower killed the head of an investigation team years ago? Some things may seem inconsequential at the moment, but you can't be sure someone won't dig them up in the future. So, your next step is to force him to jump off a building and join Mayor Cole in the great beyond? Ethan asked. No, Victor said. I don't even have to do anything. Think about it. Why would the Red Tower dare to hand him over? Isn't it because of his family? Now that his family is in my hands, don't you think the Red Tower is scared? They'll probably guess that I'm going to force Tanner to go to the task force and expose them all. Hiv. So, Tanner has to die. Another borrowed knife. You've really become a master of this. Ethan shook his head. Speaking of which, didn't you want to force the Red Tower's master out into the open? Why not really have Tanner expose them? Victor took a breath. I don't know how much Tanner actually knows. Besides, if I really did that, it would be an open declaration of war with the Red Tower. Grandfather won't help me. Right now, on my own, I probably can't beat him. In the end, it's like a nuclear bomb. I don't have to detonate it, but I have to make sure he can't sleep at night. If a person is sleep-deprived, they're bound to make a mistake. I just have to seize the opportunity. Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of melancholy. They talk about power and prestige, but this Tanner fellow, he's like a dog being led around by you and the Red Tower. His whole family's life is being played with. Sigh, it's pathetic. There's nothing pathetic about it, Victor said with a smile. Did I make him greedy? Did I force him to be corrupt? Or would he get cancer if he wasn't? Hiv. Corruption is digging your own grave. He chose it himself. Who can he blame? Ethan shot his father a look and said nothing more. Victor diligently refilled his son's teacup, changing the subject. Is everything with Apex Construction settled? Yes. And Sean Bellamy has been dealt with cleanly? Yes. Good. A person like that can't be left around. Ethan took a breath. Anyway, I've done what I promised. I'm not going back to Apex. Fair enough. Victor said. From now on, let old Jew handle it. Apex is like his child. There won't be any trouble. As for your money, I'll launder it for you in a few months with interest. Ethan, when are you finally going to force out the master of the Red Tower? Soon. Victor stared at his son, a faint, cunning glint in his eyes. He said, inexplicably, you should be careful lately, especially these next 2 days. Ethan was baffled. That's exactly what Sienna Sterling said. Seeing his son's bewildered expression, Victor smiled and explained. Jonathan Croft provided evidence to the police last night, claiming you stabbed Jason Croft 2 days before his death. But he knew perfectly well that you were at the hospital that day and had a solid alibi. Also, the evidence he provided proves nothing. At most, it would only get you summoned for questioning. He didn't do all this just to annoy me. Before Victor could finish, Ethan had a sudden realization. He wants to confirm whether I'm dead or not. Or rather, he's reminding someone that I must die. The 2 days time frame is his way of telling someone he's giving them 2 days to kill me and avenge his son. Exactly, Victor said. He's reminding the Red Tower that if you don't die, he's going to start talking. Hiv. But this is also a godsend opportunity. If the Red Tower makes a move on you, how can we not catch a trace of their master? Ethan was speechless. He wasn't shocked by Croft's method of sending a message, but by the perfection of Victor's first move on the chessboard. By letting Croft fall into the hands of the task force, he had ensured his safety, for one. For another, he had cut off the Red Tower's communication with Croft, meaning many things were now out of their control. Croft himself became a liability, which was the only way to force out the true master. This was the terrifying thing about Victor Vance. He had foresight. His thinking was meticulous. Even when his own son repeatedly disrupted his plans, he remained calm and unperturbed, never holding a grudge. Instead, he would clear the board, adapt, and redeploy, always advancing by retreating, forever holding the initiative. A man like this was nothing short of a titan. After the initial shock, Ethan grew worried again. What if the Red Tower has no connection to the celestial axis? Then how am I supposed to investigate? Ever since we destroyed their nest, we haven't heard a peep from them. Victor thought for a moment. No matter what, let's take down the Red Tower first. Anyway, neither of us has any leads on the celestial axis right now. He paused, frowning. Son, do you really have to leave? Ethan was silent for a moment. I've committed so many sins in Port Sterling. What's the point of staying? To live in constant fear? Besides, my brothers and I swore we'd spend the rest of our lives together. I can't just keep them all here because my family is here, can I? And even if I could, what about Tony and Finn? Would they be willing? Furthermore, do you have the ability to get them legitimate IDs? To let them live here peacefully, without a care in the world? Their identities are already sensitive. They're both on international most wanted lists. I don't want to take that risk. Victor looked crestfallen, sighing repeatedly. We'll see, we'll see. That afternoon, all the major officials of Port Sterling gathered, inviting multiple media outlets to a grand anti-corruption conference. Although Deputy Mayor Tanner was the initiator and chief planner, he was still second in command. He only began his performance after the newly appointed party secretary had finished his speech. The officials in the audience sat upright, most of them diligently taking notes. But a few were clearly not paying attention, just going through the motions, even occasionally replying to messages on their phones. Mr. Evans watched Tanner's passionate, righteous speech on stage and couldn't help but smirk. He then scanned the audience. Most of those diligently taking notes were regulars at the Red Tower. In contrast, those who were distracted were mostly the ones who did the actual work but had been passed over for promotion for years. To be texting in such a serious setting, they were probably busy with official duties. Mr. Evans couldn't help but feel a sense of melancholy. The ways of officialdom. Sigh, best not to speak of it. At 4:10 p.m., Tanner's speech ended. The phone in his pocket had been vibrating nonstop for the past half hour. After stepping down from the stage, he irritably took out his phone, assuming it was his monster wife. He was about to hang up when he saw it was an unknown number. But this was a number he knew all too well, one he remembered better than his parents' birthdays, Sienna Sterling's burner phone. This number was only used for important matters. Tanner rushed to the restroom and answered the call. Hello. Sienna's voice was calm. Deputy Mayor, is the meeting over? Not yet. Probably not until after 6. All right, find an excuse and come over. My people are waiting for you at the main gate. The gentleman has something important to tell you. Tanner froze. Although he was a protege of Ruffong, he had never met the man in all these years. Ruffong had never even called him. It was always Sienna who contacted him. Why did he suddenly want to see him now? Puzzled as he was, Tanner didn't dare to refuse and readily agreed. After hanging up, he saw that his wife had called him more than 10 times, and Sienna had called 4. A sense of foreboding washed over Tanner. He quickly called his wife, but the call went to a disconnected number. He called his parents. Same thing. This made him even more uneasy. As he was trying to figure things out, a colleague, also one of Ruffing's pawns, hurried into the restroom. After checking that no one was around, he quickly approached Tanner. What are you doing? Just standing here, he whispered. Miss Sterling said she has something urgent to discuss with you. She's been waiting for half an hour. Hurry up, come with me. Although Tanner didn't know what was happening, he forced himself to remain calm. He clutched his stomach. Oh, I was so busy answering Miss Sterling's call, I haven't even had a chance to relieve myself. How about this? You go and tell the secretary that the construction workers from the development zone are causing trouble again. We both need to go over there. Quick, go. The colleague thought this made sense. All right, you hurry up. After his colleague left, Tanner frantically called Victor Vance. Brother, I need a favor. Can you help me contact my family? I can't reach them. Victor was speechless. How can this man be so stupid? Deputy Mayor, I know you're very busy today, so I didn't have a chance to tell you. I sent your family on a trip to Vancouver. Their plane should have just taken off. Don't worry, Victor Vance. Tanner's face contorted with rage, but he couldn't shout too loudly. His voice was strangled and bizarre, as if someone were choking him. After a moment of grimacing, he hissed, "I've already paved the way for you with Triumph Investments. What more do you want?" Victor chuckled. Don't misunderstand. We're brothers. You're busy with official duties, passing by your own home without entering. Of course, I have to fulfill your filial duties for you. No need to be so polite. You, you. Tanner's lungs felt like they would burst. He finally realized that the gentleman didn't have anything important to tell him. They were going to kill him. Victor Vance, do whatever you want of me. Just leave my family alone. Fair enough. Hith. Victor dropped the act. You'd better run. If they get their hands on you, well. Tanner hung up and began to plot his escape. The conference room was on the 4th floor. The restroom window had a drain pipe next to it, and he could use the air conditioning units as footholds. It was a viable escape route. But Tanner was no Jackie Chan. In this life-or-death moment, the genius finally had a genuinely smart idea. His eyes darted around and landed on the ceiling of the restroom. His colleague got permission from the secretary and waited outside the conference room for 10 minutes. When Tanner still didn't appear, he went back to the restroom. But Tanner was nowhere to be seen. Seeing the restroom window wide open, the colleague panicked and leaned out to look. On the air conditioning unit of the 3rd floor sat one of Tanner's shoes. At the suburban estate, Ruffong, upon learning of Tanner's escape, was furious. He slammed his teacup on the floor, shattering it. A living person can't just evaporate. Tell them to find him. Sienna quickly made a few more calls, dispatching people to conduct a thorough search around the government building. At the same time, she had her protégés inside the building conduct a secret search. But an hour later, there was still nothing. Ruffong's brow was deeply furrowed. He cursed, "That dog Victor Vance. I never would have imagined he'd pull a stunt like this." Ahem. Sienna was still completely bewildered. "Sir, I still don't understand. Why did Victor make this move? To use Tanner against us? But Tanner has never even seen you. At most, it would only be detrimental to the Red Tower." Ruffong took a deep breath. "He wants to use my knife to get rid of Tanner. That old fox. He must have already guessed that I was going to hand Tanner over." "But us handing over Tanner, what does that have to do with him?" Sienna frowned. "Tanner isn't an idiot. If we hand him over, at most he'll confess his relationship with Jonathan Croft. He'd have to be tired of living to start pointing fingers and drag Victor into it. There's no mouth more tightly sealed than a dead man's," Ruffing said. "Besides, Victor is also trying to put me in check. Now he holds the initiative. It doesn't matter to him if Tanner dies sooner or later. But for us, every day Tanner is alive is another day of risk. He may not have seen me, but what about you all? What about the protégés in the government? If Victor really forces him to start talking, the list of names Jonathan Croft gives to the task force won't match up, and all of our plans will be thrown into chaos. Ahem. I will not allow such a threat to exist. Tanner must die." Under Victor's relentless attacks, Ruffong was at his wit's end. He knew that killing Tanner was exactly what Victor wanted, but he had no choice. Sienna grew angry. "He really doesn't think we have enough trouble already. Sir, from Jonathan Croft's sudden secret arrest to Tanner's sudden disappearance, it feels like we've been led by the nose by Victor Vance this whole time. When he showed weakness on the Development Zone project, I felt something wasn't right. I never imagined his game was this expansive. I also received news this afternoon that Cassandra Vance has been removed as chairwoman of the Apex Board. He's even more treacherous than his old man. Back in the day, when Theodore Vance and I..." Ruffing stopped abruptly, clutching his chest and coughing again. Sienna's eyes lit up. "That's right. Since you know Theodore Vance, why don't you try giving him a call and explain the current situation? Victor isn't openly at war with me. Sigh, forget it." Ruffing's brow was furrowed with worry. "Our top priority right now is dealing with the task force. We can't make any more big moves. Go and arrange for more people. We must find Tanner as soon as possible." Sienna agreed and quickly left the room. A question lingered in the beautiful woman's mind. At such a critical moment, why wouldn't Ruffing communicate with Theodore Vance? Furthermore, what was their relationship? Since they had known each other for so long, why had they stayed out of each other's way for so many years, not even meeting once? At 10 o'clock that night, on the 4th floor of the government building, in the restroom ceiling, a ceiling tile moved slightly. A gap opened, and a hand reached out, removing the tile. Tanner, about to burst from holding his bladder, carefully peeked his head out. Confirming the restroom door was closed, he pulled his head back in, adjusted his position, and then lowered his legs, inching his way down. But after hiding for so long, his legs were completely numb. The moment he landed, he fell flat on his face. The once mighty city leader, now like a stray dog, ignored the pain gritted his teeth, and got to his feet. While turning on his phone, he unbuckled his belt and let out a torrent of relief. After taking care of business, he frantically called Victor. The call connected quickly, and he heard Victor's surprised voice on the other end. Well, you're not dead yet. Impressive, very impressive. Tanner suppressed his rage. Victor Vance, don't you dare harm my family. I've long known I wouldn't have a good end. You can make me do anything. You can't harm my family. They're innocent. Fair enough. I don't harm families. Tell me what do you want me to do? Victor clicked his tongue. How do you still not figure it out? Tanner was confused. Victor couldn't be bothered to explain to the fool. He asked casually, who is the master of the Red Tower? At this point, Tanner had nothing left to lose. But he truly didn't know the answer to Victor's question. I only know he's called Ruffong. I've never seen him, never even spoken to him on the phone. It was always his bodyguard who contacted me. Then it switched to Sienna Sterling. It's the same for all the protégés in the government. Oh, Victor's tone was cold. He paused, then laughed. All right then, be careful. Have fun playing cat and mouse with Ruffong. Hiv. By the way, I'll take very good care of your family. After all, I've hired over 20 professional bodyguards overseas to protect them. That's all for now. I wish you. Hey, Hiv. Tanner stared at the disconnected phone, his eyes blazing with anger as he cursed. Wish me a hat to your mother. Rage was one thing, cursing another, but he still had to run. He just couldn't figure out what Victor was after. On the other end, Victor casually placed the phone on his nightstand, shook his head with a smile, and thought, it's a good thing he's not dead. He can torment the Red Tower for a few more days. Beside him, the beautiful secretary snuggled under the covers, saw his cheerful smile, and asked, Chairman, more good news? Victor didn't explain. He turned to look at her, his eyes full of mischief. Another round? The secretary's expression turned momentarily strange. She said with a pout, we just did. Can you? Victor smiled. The older generation, when they were sewing, they'd often have to thread a needle. If the thread was too soft to go through, they'd wet the tip with their mouth, and then it would pass through easily. The secretary gave his back a light slap, her expression a mix of shyness and allure. Chairman, you're so bad. Speaking of which, at your age, I think you should take better care of your health. No more indulgence tonight. Hearing this, Victor sighed and nodded. You're right. Even my golden son-in-law said my health is failing. Sigh. The secretary shifted, resting her head on his chest. You think that highly of Linus Hayes? He's average-looking, and his personality is a bit dull. No matter how I look at it, he's not good enough for the young miss. But my girl likes him. Victor laughed. Besides, he's a medical genius. His IQ must be off the charts. I happen to like him too. The secretary said, I always feel you're too partial to him. In the beginning, didn't you just want to use him to stay close to the old master? That's a very fast change of heart. Victor didn't explain, only saying they're a perfect match. A truly perfect match. The airy. Linus Hayes strolled out of the courtyard gate, phone pressed to his ear, and began a leisurely walk down the winding mountain path. I'm so exhausted lately, Eva Vance said on the other end. Oh, Linus replied. Director Irons still doesn't trust me. He doesn't want me back on the task force. I swear, doesn't Victor Vance have anything better to do? Ugh, I know he's just worried about my safety, but I'm a cop. If I'm scared of dying, how can I face this uniform I wear? Eva seemed to have long since grown accustomed to this style of conversation. Every time she called, she did the talking, and Linus did the listening. Linus, I'm in a really bad mood. The truth is, I've done a lot of things lately that I'm not proud of, things that betray this uniform. I think I'm starting to lose track of what's right and what's wrong. Can you come keep me company? Oh, go to hell. Eva finally snapped. You're acting like some spineless coward. How could I possibly like someone like you? Don't ever let me see you again. Linus stood in silence. He'd heard that line more times than he could count. Staring at the disconnected call on his screen, the corner of his mouth twitched into a faint, inexplicable smile. He muttered, Tomboy. The moon was bright, the stars were few, and a gentle mountain breeze drifted by. Sleep was the furthest thing from Linus's mind. He followed the path around to the back of the mountain, arriving at the small gazebo, where he often came to stare off into space and admire the view. He gazed down at the kaleidoscopic city lights below, his expression gradually turning vacant as his thoughts drifted. A short while later, Mr. Watkins, the old butler, emerged from a small trail near the gazebo. Their eyes met, and both of them started in surprise. Dr. Hayes, what are you doing out here so late? The butler asked, his breathing slightly labored. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, a look of confusion on his face. Linus's gaze flickered down to the man's shoes, noticing they were covered in a fair amount of dust. He quickly looked away, his eyes returning to the nightscape as he answered coolly, "Couldn't sleep. Came out for some air." Ever since arriving at the manor, he had made it a rule never to pry into anyone else's affairs. "Mr." Watkins nodded and started walking again. "Be careful you don't catch a chill. You should head back and get some rest soon." Linus didn't respond. After the butler had walked a good distance away, the brilliant doctor turned his head, his gaze fixed on the dirt path. His eyes flickered with a hint of suspicion, but he showed no intention of investigating. It wasn't until half an hour later that Linus finally stood, stretched, and cast a deliberate glance around his surroundings. Only then did he start down that same path, feeling his way through the darkness. After returning to his room, Mr. Watkins washed up, changed his clothes and shoes, and then retrieved a manila envelope from his nightstand. His expression instantly became conflicted, as if he were wrestling with a difficult decision. He stared at the envelope for a long time before closing his eyes. With heavy steps, he went to Theodore Vance's bedroom. The personal maid helped Theodore lean back against the headboard, then exited the room to stand guard outside the door. "Watkins, what is it? It's so late," the old patriarch asked. The butler sat on the edge of the bed and handed him the envelope. "Theodore, I found out who Linus Hayes is." Theodore took the envelope and pulled out the documents inside. After reading for a moment, he murmured, "Parents died in a car crash. No wonder he never talks about his family. It seems I was being too suspicious." "There's another file in there," Mr. Watkins said, "about a man named Kevin Johnson. He was Sylvia Vance's real godson. He's currently a volunteer in Africa." Theodore pulled out the second file, glanced at it briefly, then handed everything back to the butler. "Burn it, Mr. Watkins nodded. After a pause, he asked, "Theodore, why did you think Dr. Hayes was the orphan Sylvia sponsored all those years ago? Even if he was, what difference would it make?" Theodore gave a faint smile. "Over a decade ago, when Victor and Sylvia were tangled up, I had someone keep an eye on her to stabilize Victor's marriage. That's when I learned she was sponsoring an orphan with a gift for medicine, even adopted him as her godson. I didn't pay it much mind back then. But now this young Dr. Hayes refuses to speak about his past. He's the right age, and his medical skills are extraordinary. I couldn't help but be suspicious." He continued, "Although the Vance family had nothing to do with Sylvia's death, I never allowed her through our gates, not even to her dying day. Ethan hates me for that. If Linus were her godson, don't you think he'd hate me too? My life is in his hands right now. If that boy were to pull some trick on me, I'd have no way to defend myself. Now that we've confirmed he's clean, I can finally breathe a sigh of relief. And from now on, I won't need the maid to test my medicine for me. Besides, I have a genuine appreciation for talent. Promoting Linus will surely bring immeasurable benefits to the Vance family in the future." Mr. Watkins remained silent, his face a mask. Theodore looked at him, his lips pursed. "What's with that look? Arguing with your son on the phone again? Honestly, you made a classic mistake any man can make. Was it worth losing your wife and son over? If you can't sort it out, I'll call your son myself one of these days and beg them to come back to Port Sterling. You're too old for this stubbornness." The butler shook his head, a pained look on his face. "It's fine. Let them be." At the stroke of midnight, Linus returned to his room, his expression strangely dazed. After wiping the dust from his shoes, he went into the bathroom to shower. Staring at the crescent-shaped birthmark on his right shoulder, the brilliant doctor's breath began to tremble. His eyes reddened, and it was impossible to tell if the moisture on his face was water or tears. At the same time, in Isabel Thorne's house, the bedroom projector was, as always, playing a horror film. Isabel, dressed in a wine-red silk nightgown, sat propped against the headboard, hugging a pillow. Her eyes, full of affection, were fixed on Ethan Vance as he trimmed her toenails. The corners of her lips curled up unconsciously. "All right, done. Now for the other little piggy." Ethan didn't look up, waiting for Isabel to extend her other foot. Isabel giggled. "You're the piggy." She stretched her foot out toward him. Ethan glanced up, his eyes overflowing with tenderness. He smiled, his lips pursed, then carefully began trimming the nails on her other foot. Isabel continued to stare at him, as if she could never get enough. She traced circles on the pillow with one finger, her face glowing with a blush, wrapped in a blanket of pure happiness. After a moment, the stunning woman picked up a small fruit bowl from the nightstand, plucked a grape, and held it to Ethan's lips. "Dad called me today," she said. He wants me to convince you to stay, not to leave." Ethan didn't react, merely flicking his eyes up with a smile. "And what did you say?" Isabel didn't answer right away. After a moment of silence, she fed another grape into his mouth and said suddenly, "Honey, you should probably quit smoking for a while." Ethan popped the grape into his mouth. Hearing the words "quit smoking," he froze. "Huh." Isabel blushed. I think I want a baby." The unspoken answer made Ethan grin from ear to ear. "I'll quit right now. Let's have one. Let's have a whole litter." Isabel laughed and slapped him playfully. "Be serious. Being a rogue with my own wife is a very serious business." Ethan retorted, "Come on, let me get serious." "Stop it. You haven't washed your hands." "Hey, you. Let go. I'll bite you." Just as they were wrestling playfully, Ethan's phone rang. He glanced at it. Sienna Sterling. Ethan paused, then showed the screen to Isabel. "Sweetheart, this is probably important. Is it okay if I take it?" Isabel already held a grudge against Sienna. Now, with her calling in the middle of the night to bother her man, she was naturally displeased. But she wasn't a petty woman who couldn't see the bigger picture. She gave a reluctant nod. Ethan squeezed his wife's cheek, then answered the call. "Big brother Ethan, have you missed me?" Isabel's face grew colder. "What's up?" Ethan asked, his conscience clear. Sienna continued, All right, you're no fun at all, honestly. I have some great news for you. Want to hear it?" Ethan frowned. "What?" "It's about that person you've been looking for," Sienna said, pausing for effect. "The one with the missing toe." Ethan instantly sat bolt upright. "Who?" Sienna let out a string of giggles. "I'm not entirely sure yet. I've just gathered some clues. It's a bit complicated, and I can't explain it all in a few words over the phone. I'll send you the location. Come over, we can talk in person." Ethan was pensive. "You're not at the Red Tower?" "The Red Tower is crawling with paparazzi and police informants. With Jonathan Croft arrested, I'm a clay bodhisattva crossing the river myself. I can barely save my own skin. You think I'd dare show my face there?" "Fair enough," Ethan said. "Send me the location." "Okay," Sienna replied. "Be careful on your way here. Don't get followed. I don't want my location exposed. And hey, if your wife doesn't trust you, just bring her along, he. Ethan's eyes flickered. He said, "Wait for me," and hung up. On the other end of the line, the person speaking to Ethan wasn't Sienna Sterling at all, but one of Ruffing's maids. "Sir," he hung up. Ruffing nodded and looked at the two bodyguards beside him. "Get ready. Tonight, he's not leaving here alive." The recording of Sienna that Ruffing had given his bodyguards yesterday was for a technician to replicate her voice with a voice changer, a piece of technology that was hardly cutting edge anymore, widely used by scammers. It was also for the maid to imitate Sienna's tone and cadence, ensuring Ethan wouldn't detect anything amiss. A carefully planned murder, all centered on Ethan Vance, had quietly been set in motion. 2 in the morning. Ethan Vance drove alone, arriving at the location Sienna had sent him. It was Ruffing's suburban estate. After parking at the main gate, Ethan didn't get out immediately. Instead, he calmly observed his surroundings, his hand habitually reaching for a pack of cigarettes. He had just put one to his lips when he remembered something. He shook his head with a smile and tossed the entire pack out the car window. After a few more moments of observation, Ethan took a deep breath and called Sienna's number. "Big brother Ethan, are you here?" "Yeah, it's an hour's drive at most from your place." "What took you so long?" "Honestly, I was about to fall asleep. Had to spend half an hour explaining things to my wife to come see you." "Hey. Poor you. Just come on in. Drive through the main gate, straight ahead, then take a right at the end. I'll be waiting for you in the reception hall." "Okay." Ethan started the car and drove slowly through the gates. At that same moment, the real Sienna Sterling awoke on the sofa in her bedroom. She opened her eyes to a wave of dizziness. Struggling to her feet, the beautiful woman turned on the lights and stared thoughtfully at the red wine glass on the table. She had an unshakable habit of drinking a glass of red wine every night. Tonight, around 10, she had poured herself a glass as usual. She had just taken a sip when, as luck would have it, the men she'd sent to find Deputy Mayor Tanner called. They reported that Tanner's phone had been turned on, a single call was made, and then it was immediately shut off again. They still had no idea where he was. Sienna had slammed her hand on the table in frustration, accidentally knocking over the wine glass. After hanging up and cleaning the spill, she had drifted into a deep sleep. It wasn't hard to guess what had happened. Someone had tampered with her wine, and in the entire estate, the only person who knew about her wine habit was the one she trusted most, Ruffing. Suddenly, Sienna gasped, a terrible feeling washing over her. Ethan is in danger. She had previously suggested that Ruffing communicate with Theodore Vance, but he'd made excuses to put it off. It turned out he had already decided to kill Ethan. Frantic, Sienna started searching for her phone, only to find both of them gone. In an instant, her heart leaped into her throat. As intelligent as she was, how could she not realize that Ruffing was using her phones to bait Ethan? She had been asleep for 4 hours already. She didn't know if Big Brother Ethan. No, no. Ignoring her pounding headache, Sienna ran from her bedroom, heading straight for Ruffing's room. At that moment, Ruffong was committed, the arrow already on the bowstring. He was instructing his maid, no matter what, you have to trick him into the reception hall. The point is, you must get him out of the car. That kid's a great driver, and that GTR of his is bulletproof. We can't give him any chance to escape. He then turned to his 2 personal bodyguards. What's the status on the boat? One bodyguard replied, your decision was too sudden. I just managed to contact a boat willing to go out. They said they need to prepare and can leave at 4. Sir, why the sudden decision to send Miss Sterling away tonight? You weren't forcing her these past few days. Ruffing didn't explain. He pulled a newly delivered passport from under his pillow and handed it to the bodyguard. You 2 leave at 3. That should be enough time. You must take good care of her. Just as he finished speaking, the door was thrown open. Seeing Sienna, who should have been asleep until morning, appear at the doorway with a deathly pale face, Ruffong was stunned. A moment later, he slowly closed his eyes. Tears streamed down Sienna's face. She stared at Ruffong with pleading eyes for a moment, said nothing, then turned and ran straight for the reception hall. The 2 bodyguards exchanged a look and immediately moved to chase her. Don't hurt her, Ruffong roared, his brow tightly furrowed. The 2 men looked at each other, frozen in place. Ruffing's expression was a mix of emotions. What are you standing there for? He snapped. Go protect her. Those assassins don't know who she is. Meanwhile, Ethan had already arrived outside the reception hall. Still, he didn't rush to get out of the car, his eyes constantly scanning his surroundings. After a long moment, just as he was about to call Sienna, he saw a slender figure stumbling toward him, with 2 men in pursuit. Ethan drew his gun and stomped on the gas. As the GTR reached Sienna, it executed a sharp drift, swinging sideways to block the road and separate Sienna from her 2 pursuers. At the same time, he lowered the passenger window and fired several shots. The 2 bodyguards scrambled for cover, their hands over their heads. Sienna spread her arms, blocking the driver's side of the car, and looked at Ethan in a panic. Go. Ethan lowered his own window and stared at her with a faint smile. Get in. Just go. Sienna shook her head. Go. Roll up the window. As she spoke, the assassins hidden in the reception hall poured out, their guns all aimed at the GTR. Don't shoot. The 2 bodyguards shouted from a distance. Don't shoot. Sienna knew it was Ruffing's order not to harm her. Of course, Ethan heard it too. The powerful figure hiding in shadows clearly had feelings for Sienna. Go. Quickly. Sienna desperately shielded the driver's side, tears streaming down her face as she yelled, Go. Unflustered, Ethan reloaded his magazine and said, Get in the car. You. Sienna clenched her jaw, turned to face the assassins, and gritted out, All of you back off. Today, if any of you dares to shoot, I, Sienna Sterling, swear to God, I will make sure your entire families die a horrible death. Back off. The assassins didn't move. Ethan sighed in exasperation. Sienna, this has nothing to do with you today. You either go back, or you get in the car. With you here, it's difficult for both me and him. Sienna turned back to him, pleading, Can't you just leave? Why do you have to make this so hard for me? Go. No matter how skilled you are, can you take on this many people by yourself? I'm begging you, please just go. At this, Sienna suddenly froze. There wasn't the slightest trace of panic on Ethan's face. He didn't look like someone who had walked into a trap. He looked like someone who had come prepared. It makes sense, she thought. Whenever he went to the Red Tower before, he always brought that monster of a bodyguard with him. Why would he come to a strange place like this, in the middle of the night, all by himself? You knew this was a setup? Ethan smiled. Get in the car or hide. Your choice. Either way, get out of here first. In fact, he had felt something was strange the moment he got the call from Sienna. She had just called him yesterday to tell him to be careful, and now she was asking him to meet in the dead of night. It was contradictory, but for the sake of the truth, he'd initially dismissed the oddity. It was only when the fake Sienna told him to bring his wife that he was certain it was a trap. Sienna Sterling might not hate Isabel Thorne to the bone, but she absolutely despised her. And for a long-awaited meeting with the man of her dreams, Isabel's presence would ruin the mood. Even if Ethan had offered to bring his wife, the real Sienna would have found a way to stop him. Therefore, the person on the phone was definitely not Sienna. Once he figured that out, Ethan had immediately notified his team and given his father a heads up. Only after making full preparations did he drive to the estate. That was why he had arrived a little late. Young Mr. Vance, one of the bodyguards shouted from nearby. Sir gave orders not to harm you. We just need your cooperation. There are too many of us. You can't escape. Drop your weapon and surrender, and I promise we won't touch a hair on your head. Ethan had come in alone because he was confident in his bulletproof car, hoping to lure out all the hidden assassins in the estate to end the fight quickly. He just hadn't expected Sienna to show up. Still, it was a relief. He had originally thought she was in a dangerous situation. Ignoring the bodyguard's shouts, Ethan pulled out an earpiece, put it on, and looked at Sienna. Don't just stand there. Sienna looked dazed, a mix of guilt and disappointment on her face. Guilt for having hurt Ruffong. Disappointment that Ethan had been wary of her. Ethan saw it in her eyes. He wanted to explain that he only saw through the deception because he knew her so well. But the words reached his lips, and he swallowed them back, his heart hardening. He put the car in gear, stomped on the gas, and the GTR circled around Sienna, positioning the passenger door right beside her. He opened it. Hey, get in. Stop wasting time. Sienna numbly got into the car. After closing the door, she turned to Ethan, tears streaming down her face. Ethan, are you going to kill him? Her words confirmed it. The master of the Red Tower was here at this estate. In fact, the moment Ethan saw Sienna appear and those two bodyguards protecting her, he had already guessed the big boss was likely on site. Everything that happens today has nothing to do with you, Ethan said, then pressed his earpiece. Let's do it. The words had barely left his mouth when a barrage of gunfire erupted outside. In an instant, 5 or 6 of the assassins surrounding the GTR went down. The rest reacted with lightning speed, retreating back into the reception hall. Ethan calmly drove toward the main gate. Sienna buried her face in her hands, sobbing, unable to speak a word. She knew that the enemy Ethan had been searching for was Ruffong, and tonight, Ethan had come prepared. Winning this battle was a foregone conclusion. When Ruffong fell into his hands, the secret of the missing toe would be a secret no longer. And Ethan would surely kill him without a second thought. In this situation, what could she possibly say? Advise him to drop his weapon and let go of his hatred? She couldn't convince him, and neither could Jesus. Finn and Benny had already charged in. Jax was calmly operating a drone from inside his vehicle, monitoring the entire estate to ensure no one escaped. Lily, as always, was perched in a hidden vantage point, picking off targets. After driving the car outside the main gate, Ethan instructed Sienna, stay in the car and be good. Then he got out, gun in hand, to support his 2 brothers. He'd seen clearly that the assassins' reaction times were exceptional. They would be tough to deal with. Of course, Ethan hadn't underestimated his enemy before coming. A moment later, Victor Vance's Maybach pulled up next to the GTR, followed by a dozen other cars. Dozens of bodyguards swarmed out and stormed into the estate. Victor didn't get out of his car. He also wore an earpiece connected to Ethan's. He knew Sienna was in Ethan's car, and he knew Ruffong was likely at the estate. Logically, he should have been excited to finally meet the mysterious Ruffong, but there was no joy on his face. Instead, he looked suspicious. Ruffong had stayed hidden for so many years by being cautious. Why would he need to be here in person just to kill Ethan? Or had the sudden downfall of Jonathan Croft and Deputy Mayor Tanner really made the old bastard lose his cool? Or perhaps Ruffong wasn't here at all. For now, it was just a guess based on Sienna's reaction. As he was thinking, the GTR next to him suddenly started up and sped back into the estate. Victor thought for a moment, then shouted into his comms, "Hey you. Blondie, keep an eye on your brother's car. Wherever it stops, that's probably where Ruffong is." "Oh, okay," Jax replied. "Who are you calling Blondie?" He thought, "Even my brother doesn't call me that." In Ruffing's room, the 2 bodyguards rushed in frantically. "Sir, let's go. They brought a lot of people. The assassins we hired can't hold them off." The maid who had impersonated Sienna had already turned pale with fear at the sound of the intense gunfire. Hearing that more enemies had arrived, she began to tremble uncontrollably, looking at Ruffong, utterly lost. Ruffing's face was ashen. He slowly shook his head. "You should go. All of you go." He looked at the bodyguards. "Take the passport and go find Sienna. Ethan won't hurt her. You must get her safely out of the country." "No," one of the bodyguards protested. "Sir, you have to come with us. The 2 of us will risk our lives to get you out." Ruffong just shook his head. "I can't escape, but my life can buy you your freedom. Take the passport. Go surrender." As he was speaking, the French assassin burst into the room, furious. "Hey, what the hell is going on? Why did you call me here tonight? How come I'm seeing Steven and his crew? You're going up against them. Why didn't you tell me? I told you, I can't be seen by them. They've been hunting me for years." Ruffong smiled bleakly. "So, are you going to kill me? Or fight your way out with my men?" The assassin was enraged. He pulled out his gun. At the same time, the two bodyguards aimed their weapons at him. My bad luck for taking your money. The assassin had no intention of killing Ruffong. After chambering around, he took off to save himself. The two bodyguards still insisted on taking Ruffong with them, but his mind was made up. He even cursed at them, driving them and the maid out of the room. He was alone now. Outside, the gunfire had become sporadic. The battle was likely ending. Ruffong sat in a chair, covering his mouth as he coughed. When he looked down, there was blood in his palm. Heaven is coming for me. Ruffong chuckled bitterly and pulled a photograph from his pocket. It was a picture of Sienna on a swing in a London estate, taken several years ago. He and Sienna were the only ones who knew about that estate. To be cautious, he had never taken photos when he brought her there, nor had he allowed her to. Looking at Sienna's carefree smile in the photo, Ruffong gently stroked it with his finger and mumbled, "Little girl, you have to be this happy in the future, too." Cough, cough. His expression held no sense of doom, only a profound reluctance to let go and a flood of memories. There was also a hint of self-mockery. It was as if he had always known how his story would end. Hearing the sound of hurried footsteps outside the door, Ruffong closed his eyes and tucked the photograph back into his pocket. The next moment, Sienna rushed into the room, holding his shoes in her hand. Ruffong was stunned. "Little girl, you—" Sienna didn't speak. She glanced at the slippers on his feet, then knelt before him in a daze and began to change his shoes for him. "Little girl, you should go." Ruffong stubbornly pulled his leg away, sending the half-on shoe flying. "Go now." He picked up his phone, preparing to call his two personal bodyguards. But Sienna snatched the phone from his hand. She picked up the shoe and once again began to put it on for him. "Little girl, what are you doing? I can't get away. Don't worry about me." Ruffong was feigning ignorance. He knew Sienna was only trying to prevent the secret of his missing toe from being exposed. Sienna stubbornly finished putting on his shoes. She looked up, her tear-filled eyes meeting his, and gently shook her head, as if she had no intention of leaving. She knew all too well what Ethan and his team were capable of. Ruffong was old and frail. Escape was impossible. "Sienna," Ruffong said with a bitter smile, "listen to me. Call your escorts. Have them come get you, break you out of here. Your passport arrived today. Do as I said before. Make several transfers, change your identity a few times, and go to—" "Sir," Sienna interrupted, her voice thick with guilt. She remained kneeling on the floor. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying with you. You always used to say that if the sky were falling, you'd hold it up for me. How could I abandon you, now, to save my own skin?" Ruffong sighed. "What's the point? I'm a dying man anyway. Tonight wasn't your fault. That boy clearly came prepared. I was too hasty. Be good. You go first." Sienna gently hugged him, burying her beautiful face, the face that had captivated countless powerful men, in his lap. Her body trembled, but she didn't cry out. Ruffong softly stroked her hair, his expression inexplicably calm. He knew Ethan wouldn't hurt Sienna. He only urged her to leave because he didn't want her to see him die. But he also knew her temperament. At this point, he probably couldn't drive her away, even if he tried. Meanwhile, Ethan and his brothers had finished the fight and gathered at the entrance to the reception hall. Kneeling before them were 3 assassins, wounded to varying degrees. Finn had slashed their shirts open with his kukri, revealing the left side of their chests. On each man's heart was the tattoo of the celestial axis. "Boss, I checked the others. They're all from the celestial axis," Finn said, his face impassive. Benny was ecstatic. "I knew it. The moment the firefight started, I knew these sons of bitches felt familiar. Hot damn, this was easier than I thought. Ha ha!" They had finally found another clue to the celestial axis, and it was now almost certain that the master of the Red Tower was the organization's mysterious leader. Yet Ethan didn't seem particularly happy. His eyes were complicated, his thoughts unreadable. "Your leader, he's the man behind the Red Tower?" Ethan asked coldly. The 3 assassins, grimacing in pain, glared at Ethan, refusing to speak. Ethan had no patience for further questions. He ordered Finn to tie them up, intending to find him himself. If the master of the Red Tower was here, then finding Sienna would surely lead him to his target. Just then, Jax's voice came through the earpiece. "Damn it, 3 of them got away during the chaos. They're in a pickup, heading down a small road to the south." Ethan and his team remained calm. A moment later, Leo Bishop's voice crackled through. "South? Dylan, aren't you covering the south?" "Huh, this is the south. Okay. Boss, don't you worry. I've got more than 20 guys lying in wait here. They're not getting away." "Good," Ethan replied. Following Jax's directions, he led Benny and Finn toward his GTR. Tonight, The young master had made thorough preparations. Not only had he brought Victor in for backup, but he had also dispatched Leo Bishop and the East Side Syndicate to set up a perimeter around the estate. After all, this was a head-on confrontation with the Red Tower. He couldn't afford to be careless. However, although the Celestial Axis assassins had put up a fight, the battle hadn't been as intense as he'd expected. Could it be that the master of the Red Tower wasn't actually here? With a sense of unease, Ethan and his brothers stealthily entered the three-story villa where Ruffong was. After searching floor by floor, they finally found Ruffong and Sienna in a luxury suite on the third floor. The moment he saw Ruffong, Ethan's suspicion deepened. Seeing Ethan appear at the door, a tear-streaked Sienna stood up and blocked Ruffong, her expression panicked and helpless. "Ethan, no," she pleaded. "I'm begging you, please. I'm begging you." Ethan didn't answer, his mind racing. His eyes flickered. After a moment, he asked Ruffong, "You're the master of the Red Tower?" Ruffong slowly closed his eyes, his face ashen, and nodded. "I am." "Listen to me," Sienna said frantically, wiping the tears from her face. This was all because Jonathan Croft forced him. He wanted revenge for his son, so Sir only wanted your cooperation. He never wanted to hurt you, big brother Ethan. Get out." Ethan cut her off, his eyes turning cold and sharp as he stared past her at Ruffong. "Sienna, you should go. Be good," Ruffong said, looking at her with a faint smile. The beautiful woman had no idea that Ethan had long suspected Ruffong was his enemy, let alone that this suspicion was now all but confirmed. She was still trying to make excuses for him. "Ethan, none of this was supposed to happen. If it wasn't for Jonathan Croft." "Zhang Yao." Ethan used her old name, his gaze fixed on Sienna, firm. "Get out, big brother Ethan, no." Sienna grew more frantic, but before she could argue further, Finn darted forward and lightly chopped the back of her neck. She went limp. Out of respect for Ethan, Finn didn't let her fall. He tossed her to Benny, who lifted her like a small chicken, carried her out of the bedroom, and placed her on the living room sofa. Ethan took out his gun, slowly reloading the magazine, his eyes locked on Ruffong. "Take off your shoes." Ruffong smiled bleakly. He probably knew he couldn't hide it anymore. He met Ethan's gaze for a long moment, then took a deep breath. "Save yourself the trouble. I'm the man you're looking for." Ethan chambered around and aimed it at Ruffong. "Take them off." His power gone, Ruffong faced the cold barrel of the gun and had no choice but to obey. The old man didn't dawdle, directly removing his left shoe. Seeing the sock was slightly deflated at the big toe, Ethan's eyelids twitched. His hand instinctively tightened on the gun. "The sock, too." Ruffong complied, slowly peeling off the sock. Seeing that Ruffong was indeed missing a toe, Ethan clenched his jaw so hard it ached. "Son of a bitch, we've been looking all over for you. I'm gonna beat the shit out of you today," Benny snarled, cracking his knuckles and preparing to pounce. "Wait." Ethan stopped his hot-headed brother, his eyes still fixed on Ruffong, never wavering. "You're the leader of the Celestial Axis? Are you?" Ruffong stared back at him, then slowly closed his eyes. "It's come to this. I can tell you whatever you want to know, on the condition that you don't hurt Sienna, and you have to get her safely out of the country. Otherwise, the housekeeper will come after her." "That's not your concern," Ethan said coldly. Ruffong nodded, pursing his lips as he gathered his thoughts. "I was always monitoring Sienna's phone, so I knew you were looking for someone with a missing toe. It was Boar who sold me out, wasn't it? Heh, besides him, I never had contact with anyone else." Hearing Ruffong mention Pig by name, Ethan's gaze grew even colder. "What's your real name? And what about the serpent?" "Everyone calls me Ruffong, but my real name is Lucius Kane. As for the serpent, she was just a maid who served me for years. I settled her in Hong Kong on a recent trip. What's between us has nothing to do with her. Let her go." 30 years ago, my grandfather and the Celestial Axis were mortal enemies. If you're their leader, how could he have allowed you to build the Red Tower? Ruffong smiled. 30 years ago, when I first arrived in Port Sterling, the Celestial Axis had already been nearly wiped out by your grandfather. I was terrified of him back then. Besides, to establish a foothold in this city, I needed my own power base. So, I decided to build up my own forces and secretly rallied the remnants of the Celestial Axis, developing a new version in the shadows. The explanation was plausible, but Ethan was still suspicious. Whether it's the Celestial Axis or the Red Tower, you've always been meticulously cautious. Logically, you shouldn't be here tonight. Knowing there was no escape, Ruffong smiled candidly. You can thank your father for that. If it weren't for him, Jonathan Croft wouldn't have ended up in the hands of the Federal Task Force, and I wouldn't have lost control. Tonight, either you die, or Croft rats me out the day after tomorrow. Either way, I'm a dead man. So this was a do-or-die gamble. Ethan was still skeptical. Instead of risking a war with the Van Cess, why didn't you just run? Run? Run where? Ruffing took a breath. You think I could just flee to some country with no extradition treaty and live happily ever after? Ha ha. My sins are too great. The authorities probably wouldn't even consider extradition. Even if I ran to the ends of the earth, my only end is death. Just then, Victor Vance's voice came from the doorway. You were afraid you couldn't clean up your mess, and that Sienna Sterling would ultimately face death as well, weren't you? Victor walked into the bedroom, stared at Ruffong for a moment, and clicked his tongue. The very picture of a treacherous villain, just as I imagined. Heh, at your age, you probably can't even get it up anymore. Why so sentimental? Women, they're always trouble. Victor Vance. The moment he saw Victor, Ruffong's eyes turned glacial. You've ruined me. 30 years of work, the empire I painstakingly built, you've destroyed it all. A smile played on Victor's lips, but it was the kind that sent a chill down your spine. The debt from 10 years ago had to be paid. Heh, Ruffong sneered. My lung disease has tormented me for over a decade. It's too complex for an organ transplant, so every year I have to go abroad for injections just to stay alive. One shot costs over $1 million, and it doesn't even cure me. In other words, I could die at any moment. That's why I had to research my own cure. In the end, I just wanted to live. What did I do wrong? Cough, cough. My only mistake was entrusting that great responsibility to your woman. He continued, Dr. Vance was an absolute genius. Her research could not only cure my disease, but also extend my life by several years. Beyond its personal benefit, the value of her work was immeasurable. Cough, cough. What a shame. For her so-called justice, she secretly destroyed the precious fruits of her hard labor, no matter how I threatened or tempted her, or even. At this, Ruffing instinctively glanced at Ethan, then paused. I wanted her dead less than anyone. Ethan's face was a cold mask. He asked the one question that had always baffled him. Back then, why didn't you kill me? Why did you save my life? Ruffing took a deep breath. Back then, you were useless to me. It was the Joker. He insisted on keeping you alive. Said he wanted to raise you into his best child, to amuse him for a while. Once he got bored, he'd dig out your organs and sell them. Who knew you'd be so damn tough? You survived that storm. It was fate, I suppose. Later, when you returned to Port Sterling, I was focused on my research and didn't want to provoke the Van Cess, an unnecessary complication, so I never made another move against you. With that, there was little room left for doubt for Victor and his son. Ethan tilted his head back, silently calling out to his mother. A moment later, he raised his gun. Almost simultaneously, Victor grabbed his wrist. So, ouais. Ethan shot him a questioning look. Dying like this is too easy for him, Victor said with a vicious smile. He needs to die with some value. To make the task force pack up and go home. Father and son locked eyes for a moment, then spoke in unison. Ethan, jumping. Victor, jumping. Ruffing showed no fear, calmly accepting his fate as if the two men were discussing a fate that had nothing to do with him. Just then, a call came in from Leo Bishop. Boss, those 3 guys, they got away. We only managed to wound one of them. One of the 3, a guy in a helmet, was a real pro. I think he's on the same level as you guys. At this point, a few escaped assassins were a minor issue. Ethan didn't dwell on it. How are your men? 10 or so casualties, boss. Leo sounded ashamed and heartbroken. That guy in a helmet was really something else. Like a ghost, we couldn't stop him. Get your brothers back for now, Ethan said. I'll handle things here and find you later. You got it. The 3 who escaped the encirclement were Ruffing's 2 bodyguards and the French assassin. In reality, the foreigner hadn't helped the 2 men out of kindness. He was only thinking of his own safety. More bodies meant more distractions, and even if their combat skills were lacking, they could still draw enemy fire. Now, the 3 of them were crashing frantically through a patch of woods. One of the bodyguards clutched a gunshot wound in his shoulder, hissing in pain, while the other babbled, just hold on. Sir told us to take Miss Sterling with us, and we failed him. I never should have listened to you. You never used to be such a coward. The foreigner's eyes glinted with mockery. He couldn't understand this loyalty at a time like this. But since they had broken through, these 2 bodyguards were now a liability. More importantly, if they were captured by Ethan, they might sell him out. The assassin had already thought this through. After running a few more steps, he suddenly spun around and aimed his gun at the talkative bodyguard. But before he could fire, a single bang echoed through the woods. The bodyguard crumpled to the ground, shot in the head. The assassin was shocked. He pressed his gun to the other bodyguard's head. Hey, you just killed your brother? Because he yelled at you? The remaining bodyguard tossed his own gun to the ground, showing he meant no harm. He said coolly, "Sworn brothers. What kind of brothers are they?" That sentiment, at least, resonated with the assassin. But the question remained. Why kill him? It was just a complaint, hardly worth a bullet. Facing the assassin's suspicious gaze, the bodyguard clutched his bleeding shoulder and said, "Come with me. Someone wants to see you." The assassin was confused. The bodyguard continued, "Ruffong only paid you a deposit. Don't you want the rest of the money?" The assassin's eyes lit up. "It seems that old man wasn't your real boss after all." "Huh. Interesting. If someone's paying the final bill, why not?" "Huh." An hour later, the bodyguard led the assassin to the coast. He pointed to a lone yacht docked by the shore. "Go on. The person who wants to see you is on board. I'll keep watch." The assassin scanned the area, then cautiously boarded the yacht, gun in hand. It was quiet on board. The cabin was dimly lit, with only an old man sitting on the sofa. Seeing this, the assassin relaxed his guard and pushed the door open. Hearing someone enter, the old man slowly turned his head and smiled faintly. "Hello. You must be Mike." This old man was none other than the Vance family's butler, Mr. Watkins. Phoenix Crest Manor. Around 7 in the morning, Sienna Sterling shot up in bed with a scream, as if waking from a terrible nightmare. On the sofa nearby, Ethan Vance, who had been sitting in a daze all night, was still replaying the previous night's events in his mind. The sudden scream made his hand instinctively reach for his waist. Sienna was drenched in sweat, gasping for breath. She looked around at the unfamiliar surroundings, momentarily disoriented. Her peripheral vision caught the figure on the sofa, and she turned to see Ethan's impassive face. He stared at her without a word, then after a moment, deliberately shifted his gaze away. Sienna pieced together the memories of last night. Her heart sank, and she stared blankly at Ethan. Where is he? She desperately wished that the images in her mind were just a dream. Ethan's lips parted. "I've arranged for a boat. You leave tonight. Where is he?" Sienna demanded, tears streaming down her face, her eyes fierce. Ethan didn't answer. Despair washed over Sienna's face, and she broke down into sobs. In truth, there was no need to ask. At 4 in the morning, Victor Vance had used her to threaten Ruffong, forcing him to go to the Red Tower alone and end things with dignity. Ruffong knew that while Ethan was reluctant to harm Sienna, his father had no such compassion. But in reality, a threat wasn't even necessary. Standing on the rooftop, Ruffong had looked out at the empire of power he had built with his own hands, given a self-deprecating smile, and leaped. A storm of emotions churned within Ethan. He walked heavily to the bedside and pulled the wailing Sienna into his arms. "Let go." Sienna glared at him viciously, her voice cold. "Ethan Vance, I know I have no right to love you and no right to hate you. You've gotten your revenge. Are you happy now? Ha, ha, ha. But you killed the person who was the best to me in this world. What am I supposed to do now?" "What? Let go of me." Ethan remained silent, holding her tightly as she struggled and screamed. After a long time, Sienna seemed to run out of energy. She slumped against his shoulder, tears still flowing endlessly, her heart a wasteland. "I'm begging you, just kill me too. Ethan, really, I'm begging you. In this life, the person I've wronged the most is him. Falling in love with you. That was the mistake. I'm begging you, kill me, please. I don't want to live like this. I don't want it all. What's left of my life?" The beautiful woman craved power, but compared to her spiritual anchor, power was worthless. Once, he was the one who had pulled her out of the abyss. Ethan's Adam's apple bobbed. "What's the point of taking it out on yourself?" he said in a low voice. "If you have guts, get revenge. Just like all those years ago." A profound sense of powerlessness enveloped Sienna. She smiled tragically. "Get revenge? How? Huh? Ethan, you tell me how? Ask God for revenge. Why? Why did it have to be him? Why? Did it have to be you? Why did my fate have to be arranged like this?" Ethan was silent. On the verge of collapse, Sienna happened to glance at a photograph on the nightstand, the one Ethan had found in Ruffing's pocket, of her on a swing at the estate abroad. She froze, her eyes wide. A moment later, she shoved Ethan away. "Get out. I don't want to see you." Ethan's lips moved. "That photo. I found it in his pocket. It's yours. I'll see you off tonight. Live a good life. I don't need you to manage my life." Sienna got out of bed, stuffed the photo into her pocket, grabbed her purse, and stormed out. Ethan blocked the doorway. "The police are looking for you. Don't go out." Sienna glared at him. "You don't have to be so hypocritical. Whether I live or die has nothing to do with you. Move." Ethan didn't budge. "You." Sienna bit her lip. "I have something I need to take care of. Get out of my way. Let me pass. Move. Do you want to force me to die in front of you? I'm telling you, even if you send me away, I'll come back. Don't flatter yourself. Ethan frowned and stepped aside. Sienna strode out of the room, dialing her assistant at the Red Tower as she walked, telling her to come pick her up. As she jogged down the mountain and waited for her ride, she pulled the photo from her pocket, her expression growing more complex. At that estate, Ruffong had never allowed photos. So who took this picture? And she had never seen him carry a photo like this before. Thinking back to last night, to Ruffing's calmness when he learned Ethan had come prepared, to his tranquility in the face of death. A chill crept up Sienna's spine, and her face drained of all color. Some things, it seemed, were not as simple as they appeared. Back in a manor, Ethan, feeling lost, went downstairs to the living room. Victor, who also hadn't slept all night, was on the phone, trying to reach Deputy Mayor Tanner, whose phone was still off. With Ruffong dead, Tanner's death also needed to be expedited. He had wanted to borrow another's knife to kill, but who could have predicted Ruffing's move last night? Son, aren't you going to get some sleep? Victor picked up a pack of cigarettes and offered one to his son. Ethan waved it away, sitting on the sofa opposite him. Quit. Victor was taken aback for a second, then quickly understood. A wave of disappointment washed over him. It seemed his wonderful daughter-in-law had made her choice. She was leaving with his son. Victor, don't you think something about last night was strange? Ethan asked. Victor pondered for a moment, lit his cigarette, and took a drag. Ruffing's do-or-die gambit. I didn't see that coming. It certainly wasn't a wise move. But as for being strange, not really. He was at the end of his rope. Ethan couldn't find any other explanation either. Last night, all his questions had been answered by Ruffing, and using Sienna to lure him into a trap was a clever plan. If he hadn't spotted the flaw, he would have met a terrible end. But still, Ethan felt something was off. Regardless, the old bastard is dead, Victor said. The Red Tower threat has been eliminated. As for Sienna Sterling, you should stay out of it. That girl is no pushover. Ethan remained silent. Ethan, don't be in such a hurry to leave. Wait until I take over Triumph Investments, until all of this is over. It won't be too late to leave then, Victor said. Ethan looked up at him, his tone lukewarm. Harrison hasn't given up on Triumph either. Grandfather will surely help him. How confident are you? Victor smiled faintly. Unless Harrison kills me, he doesn't stand a chance. Heh. He let the smile fade, changing the subject. Son, Director Irons will definitely use Ruffing's death to make Jonathan Croft talk. I'll handle the rest, but we need to get our story straight about Jason Croft's death. We can't have any slip-ups when the time comes. Noon, at the Federal Building. Director Quentin Irons entered the room where Jonathan Croft was being held. For the past 2 days, Croft had barely slept. His eyes were ringed with dark circles, and his face was gaunt. Jonathan, are you still not going to cooperate? Irons said in a low voice. Croft remained motionless, completely ignoring him. I'll ask you one more time. The day before yesterday, when you misled the police into arresting Ethan Vance, who were you sending a signal to? Jonathan, I'm giving you a chance. Don't think I don't know you were just a stand-in. The crimes committed by Croft Consolidated are too numerous to count. Do you really want to take the fall for everything and go down in infamy? Croft's lips moved. Director Irons, I'm very tired. I don't want to talk. Heh. Irons sneered. Is Lucius Kane threatening you with your family? Hearing the name, a tremor went through Croft, but he kept his face impassive. My son is dead. I have no other family. Your ex-wife and your brothers and sisters, they're all living together abroad, getting along quite well, I hear. That $2 billion trust fund, they all got a share, didn't they? Croft's expression didn't change. They've all become foreign citizens. I cut ties with them long ago. Yes, our organization can't touch them. However, Irons sighed, then suddenly pulled out several photos and tossed them in front of Croft. He can't threaten your family anymore either. The moment he saw the photos, Croft shot upright, his face a mask of disbelief. The pictures were taken by the police at the scene of Ruffing's suicide. You should be glad we arrested you. Otherwise, his end would have been your end. Irons said sharply. Speak. Was he the real owner of the Red Tower, your master? Seeing the gruesome state of Ruffing's body, Croft's hair stood on end. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He couldn't imagine how such a powerful figure could have died. What had happened outside these last 2 days? And who had the power to take out Ruffong? The more he thought, the more terrified he became, his scalp tingling. Now can you talk? Irons's face was grim. He paused. According to our investigation, a total of $50 billion has vanished from Croft Consolidated. First, tell me where that money went. Croft stared into space for a long time before finally closing his eyes in despair. I'll talk. I'll tell you everything. It wasn't until evening that Croft finished his confession. When Irons returned to his office, his secretary, Mr. Evans, followed him in. Director, most of the officials Croft named are in custody. A few of them must have heard about Lucius Kane's death this morning and tried to run, but they've all been apprehended. The only one still missing is Deputy Mayor Tanner. He disappeared yesterday, and his phone has been off. Oh, and that's Sienna Sterling. She hasn't been seen for days. A citywide manhunt. We can't let either of them escape, especially Sienna Sterling. She's crucial. I've already coordinated a multi-departmental search, Evans said, then changed the subject. Director, do you think Lucius Kane's death could be related to the Van Cess? It's just too strange. Irons' brow furrowed. Have Victor and Ethan Vance been brought in for questioning? They're on the 7th floor. Our colleagues are interrogating them now. We can only hold them for 3 days at most. Evans said, but based on what Croft confessed, there's no hard evidence. I doubt we'll be able to pin anything on the father and son. Interrogate them for now, Irons said. Croft sent a signal to have Ethan Vance killed, but now Lucius Kane is the one who committed suicide. There has to be a secret here, and it's definitely connected to that father and son. 3 days passed in a flash. Ethan was actually released the same night he was brought in. Victor, due to his deeper involvement, was interrogated for the full 3 days. Although Croft and several high-ranking officials implicated him, there was no evidence, and the task force had no choice but to let him go. It was after 10 at night when he returned to Phoenix Crest Manor. His beautiful secretary was waiting at the courtyard gate. When she saw Victor get out of the car, she hurried to greet him. Chairman, your bath is ready. Go have a soak. Victor chuckled. Good. Together. After their tryst, Victor was exhausted. He lay in the bathtub with his eyes closed while his secretary gently massaged his shoulders, her face still flushed. Chairman, Cassandra Vance came to the manor this afternoon. She and her family caused a huge scene at the Eyrie and made the old master vomit blood. They all left the country this afternoon. I suppose she was afraid you'd use the old master's name to settle scores with her after you got out. Victor smiled. I'm still too soft-hearted in the end. Otherwise, would she have been able to leave the country alive? Sigh. Is the old master's condition serious? I just asked Dr. Hayes. He said the old master is still in a coma, and it's not looking good. Chairman, should we go up and see him? Forget it. Tomorrow. The secretary nodded. Right. And Mr. Watkins hasn't been at the manor these past 3 days. No one knows where he went. The old master was looking for him yesterday, too. Victor opened his eyes, a thoughtful look on his face. He's been gone for 3 days? Yes. Do you think you want to see his son? Victor pondered this silently. A moment later, a maid knocked on the door. Chairman, the young miss is crying and refuses to sleep. She insists on sleeping with you. Victor sighed, stood up, put on his robe, and strode into the bedroom. Daddy, Lucy Vance had already snuggled under the covers. I want to sleep with you tonight. Victor shook his head with a smile. You're in 1st grade now. Why are you still so mischievous? Be good. Go to your own room. I don't want to. Lucy pouted, looking fierce. I haven't seen you in days. I missed you. Victor's face was full of doting affection. He got into bed and held Lucy in his arms, planning to let the maid carry her to her own room after she fell asleep. The little girl nestled against his arm, her small hands clutching his large one, mumbling numbers in English. 1, 2, 3, 4. She paused for a moment before counting 5. Victor smiled kindly. Catch a tiger by the toe. The little girl pursed her lips, blinked her eyes in confusion, then sat up and grabbed Victor's foot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Huh, there's an extra one. Oh, honey, your math is... Victor began, then suddenly froze. His expression went rigid. Night at the Eyrie was silent. A thick blanket of clouds obscured the moon and stars, and the mountain wind grew stronger, heralding an impending storm. In the bedroom, Theodore Vance lay unconscious, an oxygen mask over his face. His eldest grandson, Harrison, had been by his bedside since noon, only leaving an hour ago to deal with some business matters. Now, only the maid was watching over the old master. Suddenly, a flurry of hurried footsteps echoed from the courtyard. The maid, sitting by the bed, looked up, rose, and went to the window to peer out cautiously. A moment later, a figure darted across the courtyard like a ghost, so fast it vanished into the darkness in the blink of an eye. The maid frowned and rushed out of the room, chasing in the direction the figure had disappeared. Not long after she left, Victor Vance strode through the courtyard gate and went straight to his father's bedroom. Looking at Theodore lying unconscious on the bed, Victor's expression was complex. He called out softly, "Father, are you feeling any better?" "Father." Seeing no reaction, Victor grew thoughtful. He bent down and gently lifted a corner of the blanket, revealing Theodore's right foot. Even through the sock, It was clear that all 5 toes were intact. Holding his breath, Victor glanced back at the still unresponsive Theodore. His hand, clutching the blanket, tightened. Just as he was about to lift it higher, as luck would have it, his phone rang. Almost simultaneously, the personal maid rushed back into the room. Victor quickly dropped the blanket and answered his phone. Hello. Yes, I'm on my way. Bring the contracts. We'll have them notarized tomorrow morning. Don't worry, the terms we agreed on still stand. You'll all remain shareholders in Triumph Investments. The maid's face was grim. She stared at Victor without blinking until he finished his call, then spoke in a cool tone. Third chairman, what are you doing here? Victor chuckled. I just got out, didn't I? I heard the old master was so angry he passed out, so I came to see him. It's getting late. You should go back and rest. I'm here, the maid said. Victor nodded. All right. Thank you for your hard work. If the old master wakes up, let me know immediately. I will. Victor calmly walked out of the bedroom. The maid stood by the window, her gaze fixed on his back until he had disappeared through the courtyard gate, her face exceptionally dark. After leaving the area, Victor called his driver, preparing to head to his meeting with the major shareholders of Triumph Investments. As they passed Mr. Watkins's quaint little cottage, Victor had the driver stop. He got out and went inside. The cottage was dark, giving it an eerie feeling. Victor went to the bedroom door and gave it a gentle push. It wasn't locked. Once inside, Victor turned on a light and looked around. He pulled open the drawer of the writing desk. It was empty. He then checked the nightstand and an inconspicuous wooden wardrobe in the corner. The moment he opened the wardrobe, a memorial tablet came into view. On it were the words, Beloved wife, Jolie Sue. Victor's expression turned strange for a second. He remembered that Mr. Watkins's wife was not named Jolie. But years ago, Mr. Watkins had an affair with a countrywoman. When his son found out, he burned her to death. It was because of that incident that the father and son were still estranged. Perhaps that countrywoman was named Jolie, Victor thought. He picked up the tablet to inspect it. He happened to notice a nearly invisible seam on its base. He tentatively pulled at it, and the base slid open like a small box. A 2-inch photograph fell out. It was a picture of a little boy, about 5 or 6 years old, wearing a tattered tank top. Victor's eyes suddenly lit up. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. He seemed to recognize the boy. But Mr. Watkins's strange disappearance still puzzled him. Regardless, acquiring Triumph Investments was the top priority. Many things could be confirmed later. Acting too rashly would be detrimental to the bigger picture. Victor placed the tablet back where he found it, closed the wardrobe, and left the cottage, heading to the tea house where he was meeting the shareholder. He had no idea that just as he left, a figure emerged from a side room of the cottage. Almost at the same time, a bolt of lightning tore across the black sky. Crack boom! The flash illuminated the courtyard, revealing the figure standing under the eaves. It was the face of a Frenchman, grinning ominously. 2:30 in the morning. With a crash of thunder, Ethan Vance woke from a nightmare, sitting up in bed, gasping for air. Isabel Thorne groggily rubbed her sleepy eyes, sat up, and hugged him. Honey, did you have a nightmare? Ethan's mind was in turmoil. After catching his breath, he took Isabel's hand and managed a soft, yeah. Isabel nestled against his shoulder, wiping the sweat from his brow. Why would you have a nightmare out of the blue? Is it because you've been watching horror movies with me these past few days? Ethan shook his head, his lips parting. I dreamed that, Victor. Ugh, it's just a dream. Just a dream. Isabel kissed his cheek and smiled. You know, you act like you can't be bothered with him, but I can tell you really care about him. Come on, go take a shower. You're all sweaty. You stink. Ethan's lips curled into a smile. He playfully squeezed his wife's face. Sweetheart, I'm so tired. Can you wash me? Stop it. Isabel slapped his back. I'm not sweaty. Go on, wash yourself. Then I'll have to find a way to make you sweat, Ethan said roguishly. Oh, honestly, it's the middle of the night. Have you no shame? Go, stop messing around. Ethan chuckled wickedly, held his wife's face, and kissed her for a long time before finally getting out of bed and heading to the bathroom. A moment later, Ethan's phone on the nightstand rang. Isabel picked it up and saw it was Harrison Vance. A call at this hour had to be urgent. Isabel hesitated for a second, then answered. Harrison. Harrison's voice was anxious. Isabel, where's Ethan? He's in the shower. Get him on the phone now. A sense of foreboding washed over Isabel. She scrambled out of bed, heading toward the bathroom as she asked, Harrison, what's wrong? Harrison was silent for a moment. Isabel, you need to prepare yourself. My uncle. He had an accident an hour ago. He drowned. Isabel, who had just reached the bathroom door, froze. The phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. Hearing the noise, Ethan came out of the bathroom with a towel wrapped around his waist. seeing his wife's horrified expression and the phone on the floor displaying Harrison's name. The young master's heart lurched. He quickly picked it up. "Harrison, what is it?" At the same time, Isabel threw her arms around him and burst into tears. The rain intensified. 40 minutes later, the GTR drifted to a stop at the manor, parking at the entrance to Victor's courtyard. The moment Ethan got out, bodyguards and servants rushed forward, scrambling to hold umbrellas over him. "Young master." Ethan's face was ashen. He strode into the courtyard, with Isabel, who was already a wreck, close behind him. In the center of the living room, a blanket was spread on the floor. Victor's body lay on top of it, soaked and unnaturally pale. Eva Vance knelt beside him, not crying out loud, but with tears streaming relentlessly down her face. Hearing Ethan enter, the beautiful detective forced herself to her feet and collapsed into his arms. "Ethan! Dad's gone. Sob." Ethan's expression was dazed and vacant, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. His eyes were fixed on his father's body. His heart felt like it had stopped, and he struggled to breathe. He swayed on his feet. In that instant, the entire world seemed to go silent. The sobbing of Isabel and Eva, the cries of the maids and bodyguards, the wind, the rain, the thunder, all of it faded away. All he could see was a world bleached of color. A thick wave of grief crashed over him, surging out to fill the cold, rainy night. Seeing her husband on the verge of collapse, Isabel wiped her own tears away, her heart aching. "Honey, if you're sad, just cry. Don't be like this. Honey, please don't be like this." Ethan clenched his jaw so tight it trembled. His body shook violently, his eyes were bloodshot, but not a single tear would fall. A moment later, Harrison Vance, who had been busy managing things, walked into the living room. He stood beside Ethan, and, after a moment of silence, he clapped him on the shoulder. "Ethan, my condolences. Uncle was meeting with the shareholders of Triumph Investments tonight. On the way back, the car hit some glass on a curve on Bayside Drive. The tire blew out, the road was slick with rain, and the car lost control. It went through the guardrail and fell off a 30-foot cliff into the sea. Because it was armored, the car was heavy, and the doors couldn't be opened underwater. The glass was bulletproof, too. It couldn't be broken. The driver and my uncle's personal bodyguard, they both died. The other bodyguards did their best. They didn't have your number, so they contacted me." The words had barely left his mouth when Ethan whipped out his gun and pressed it to Harrison's forehead. His eyes blazed with a mixture of grief and fury. "Tell me," he gritted out, "was it you? Huh? Tell me." Isabel was terrified. She grabbed Ethan's arm. "Honey, calm down. Put the gun down." Eva also reached out and gripped Ethan's gun. "Ethan, don't do this." What Harrison said is what the other bodyguards told us. My colleagues also pulled the surveillance footage from that stretch of road. The situation is consistent. At the same time, Chase and 7 or 8 other bodyguards rushed in, all drawing their weapons and aiming at Ethan. "Put your guns down," Harrison shouted at his men. He glanced at Chase, who was positioned to his right rear, a strange look flickering in his eyes. He then turned back to Ethan. "Ethan, I understand how you feel, but please, use your head. Do you really think I would do something like this?" Ethan didn't lower his gun, his eyes swimming with murderous intent. "You want to inherit the family fortune, and that couldn't happen unless Victor was dead. I can't think of anyone else." Harrison took a deep breath, his gaze unwavering as he met Ethan's. "It wasn't me." Just then, Benny, the large man, roared as he burst in. "Who dares touch my brother?" Almost simultaneously, Finn and Jax, each holding an M16, rushed to Ethan's side, creating a standoff with Harrison's men. "Hey, don't do anything stupid. There's a sniper outside," Jax said coldly. As he spoke, a red dot appeared on Harrison's forehead. The atmosphere grew even more tense. "Honey," Isabel's face was pale. She looked at Ethan and shook her head. "Don't be impulsive. Please, listen to me." Ethan stared at Harrison for a long moment, forcing himself with all his might not to lose his mind. He slowly lowered his gun. His voice was like ice. "The bodies of the driver and the bodyguard?" Eva choked back a sob. "I've already sent them to the precinct for autopsy. I have their phones." On this point, the siblings were in agreement. Victor's death was too sudden. It didn't feel like an accident. "Get out," Ethan said, his eyes sweeping over Harrison's bodyguards before finally landing on Harrison's face. "All of you get out." Harrison pursed his lips and sighed. "My condolences." He led his men away. After stepping out of the courtyard, Harrison stopped and looked at Chase. "You all stay here and keep watch. If there's anything you can do to help, do it." Chase nodded. A bodyguard beside him grumbled, "I don't think he appreciates it." Harrison shot him a glare and turned to get into his car. The driver folded the umbrella, got into the driver's seat, and started the engine. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Mr. Vance just now. Chase seemed a bit off. If we had started a fight with Ethan, his position would have been a primary threat not to Ethan, but to you. Harrison's eyes flickered open. If you ever flap that tongue of yours again, he said in a low voice, I'll pull out. The bodyguard went silent, terrified. Harrison stared out the window, his eyes unreadable. A moment later, he received a text message. The $40 million that didn't add up in the company headquarters accounts for May and June was transferred by Mr. Watkins under the old master's name. Harrison was stunned. He had always assumed his own greedy father had secretly embezzled it. He never would have thought it was Mr. Watkins. The old man had been Theodore's brother for a lifetime. Getting his hands on Theodore's seal and signature would be easy. But he had always lived a simple life. Why would he do something like this? Or was it Theodore who had instructed him? But if it was, why would the old master need to be so secretive about a mere $40 million? Why split it into several transactions, as if afraid of being traced? And speaking of which, where had Mr. Watkins been for the past 3 days? It was like he had vanished off the face of the earth. What had happened to the Vance family in May and June? In fact, nothing major had happened within the family. But in the underworld, it had been a bloodbath. That was precisely when Leo Bishop and the East Side Syndicate were launching their massive anti-drug campaign across all of Port Sterling. In other words, during those 2 months, the East Side Syndicate had effectively cut off the Celestial Axis's main source of income. Midday, the rain was still falling. Phoenix Crest Manor was a sea of white. White silk ribbons adorned the streetlights lining the mountain road. A memorial hall had been set up in Victor's courtyard before dawn. News of Victor's accidental death had already spread throughout the city. Dignitaries from all walks of life came to offer their condolences. The courtyard was packed with people holding black umbrellas, all with looks of sorrow, especially the great director Ron Wallace, who wept so hard he nearly fainted. But for all his acting prowess, there was no performance in his grief. Decades of friendship had turned them into brothers. How could he not be heartbroken by such a sudden loss? Isabel, Eva, and Harrison knelt in the memorial hall. The one person who should have been there, Ethan, was nowhere to be seen. The guests didn't dare say it out loud, but they couldn't help but mock the profligate son in their hearts. It was well known that the father and son didn't get along, but for him not to show up after his own father's death? Wasn't he afraid of being struck by lightning? Compared to Harrison, he was a world apart. Now, with the most qualified successor to the Vance Empire dead, the sole heir was Harrison. Looked at this way, could there be something suspicious about Victor's death? The guests all had their suspicions, but who would dare voice them? In the end, more than half of the guests present were hoping the Vances would fail to pass the torch and collapse completely. Watching the endless stream of guests coming up the mountain, Eva glared at Harrison. Harrison, are you in such a hurry to announce to the whole city that you're the heir to the Vance family? Harrison didn't explain, simply tossing 2 stacks of joss paper into the brazier. Earlier, Eva had decided against allowing guests to come pay their respects. In her view, her father's death was suspicious, and most of the attendees were just here to watch the show. But Harrison had overruled her. His position as heir was now set in stone, but the Vance family had been severely weakened. Turning away all these guests would be arrogant and detrimental to future business. Isabel was on edge, constantly checking her phone. Not wanting to bother Ethan, she sent a text to Benny. Where's your brother? Benny replied, right next to me. Don't worry, sis-in-law. He's fine. Around 4 in the morning, the medical examiner had completed the autopsies on Victor's driver and bodyguard and sent the results to Eva. The report showed that everything was normal. They had both drowned, with no signs of poison in their blood. At the same time, Jax had cracked their phones and found no records of any collusion. After learning these 2 results, Ethan had said nothing. He took his team down the mountain, first sending the Maybach for analysis, then going to the scene of the accident. He also had Victor's bodyguards invite the 3 Triumph Investment shareholders who had met with Victor the night before to Phoenix Crest Manor. Now, the brothers had been at the crash site for over an hour, but had found nothing. All the evidence at the scene suggested that it really was just an accident. The rain poured down. The brothers stood in the gray mist, none of them holding an umbrella. Ethan was hunched over, as if the weight of the rain was too much for him to bear. He stood outside the broken guardrail where his father's Maybach had crashed, his breathing heavy. Below him, a 30-foot cliff dropped to the sea. The waves crashed violently against the rocks, seeming to pound against his own heart. The young master's head was bowed, his heavy eyelids drooping, open just a crack to stare at the sea, as still as a statue. He was soaked through, his messy hair plastered to his forehead. Rainwater trickled from his hair, down his temples and onto his shoulders and chest, chilling him to the bone. Only the rain on his cheeks was scalding hot. Benny stood behind him, watching his brother's desolate figure, letting out heavy, choked sobs from time to time. A moment later, the window of the Hummer in the back rolled down. Jax called out, "Boss, I found something on the surveillance footage. Around 12:30 last night, there were 2 cars stealthily following your dad's convoy." Hearing this, Finn darted over to the car door, his eyes cold as he stared at Jax's laptop screen. Ethan slowly blinked, turned, and walked toward the Hummer. He pulled open the door and got in. Find him. At noon, the Hummer was parked in front of Spa. Finn was the first to get out. He scanned the area and quickly found the 2 cars in the parking lot. They should be inside. Jax immediately started typing furiously, blocking all the surveillance cameras. Ethan and Benny chambered rounds in their pistols, attached silencers, and tucked the guns into their waistbands before following Finn into the Spa. As soon as they entered, the lobby manager greeted them with a smile. "Welcome, distinguished guests." Before he could finish, Finn pressed a gun into his stomach, made a shushing gesture, and said in a low voice, "We have a few questions for you. Don't be afraid." The manager looked as if he'd seen a ghost. His face drained of color, and he nodded, trembling. Finn pointed to the 2 cars parked side by side in the lot. The Kia and the Audi. Where are the owners? In the private room on the 3rd floor. They've been staying here for a few days. The leader, his name, Brody Chun, Jonathan Croft's godson. The police are looking for him. He's good friends with my boss, so he's been hiding here. Hearing it was Croft's godson, Ethan's eyes flickered. "Could you please take us up to see him?" Finn said, his face impassive. Seeing how terrified the manager was, he politely added, "Thank you." At the same time, in a private room on the 3rd floor, Brody Chun was wolfing down takeout, looking quite pleased with himself. A bodyguard asked, "Mr. Chun, now that Victor Vance is dead, shouldn't we be getting out of here?" Brody waved his hand. "There's still that little bitch, Sienna Sterling. My godfather put up with so much crap from her. I have to get revenge for him. After we eat, you guys go find out where she is. Let's try to take care of her as soon as possible." Just as he finished speaking, there was a sudden knock on the door. The bodyguards in the room instantly grew alert, all drawing their guns. Brody looked toward the door and gave one of his men a look, signaling him to check. The next moment, the manager's voice came from outside. "Knock, knock. Mister. Brody, it's me. I'm here to replace your toiletries." Brody relaxed and waved for the bodyguard to open the door. However, the moment the door opened, before Brody and his men could react, they saw a large man grab the bodyguard with one hand, lift him up, and charge into the room. Finn and Ethan followed close behind with their guns drawn, instantly controlling the situation. The manager cowered by the door, his head in his hands. Brody, who had just put a spoonful of food in his mouth, froze, his body rigid. "Who is Brody Chun?" Ethan asked coldly. The bodyguards all looked at Brody. Ethan strode over to him, took the spoon from his mouth, his eyes exceptionally cold, and got straight to the point. "Why were you following my father last night?" Brody spat out the food in his mouth and let his gaze drift over the 3 brothers' faces. He started to laugh. "Of course I wanted to kill him." The bodyguards instantly panicked. "It wasn't us," one of them blurted out. "We followed him last night, but saw he had a lot of bodyguards, so we didn't dare make a move." "Yeah, it really wasn't us." Ethan Vance glanced at the bodyguards, then his eyes, brimming with killing intent, settled back on Brody. Brody, likely knowing he was a dead man, just sneered. "My only regret is that Victor Vance didn't die by my hand. If he hadn't, I'd still be looking for a chance to kill him." Ethan closed his eyes, a wave of disappointment washing over him. Brody and his crew were all thugs, muscle without a mind. If Victor's death truly wasn't an accident, these idiots weren't the ones capable of orchestrating it. "I get it," Ethan said, his voice low. "You had the motive, you had the nerve, but you didn't have the brains." Brody just snorted. "So what? Your old man is still dead, isn't he?" "Ha ha. What do you call that? Karma's a bitch. Guess God finally came to collect." "Ha ha." Before his laughter could fade, Ethan squeezed the trigger. Even with the suppressor, the shot made a heavy, muffled crack. The spa manager, huddled by the door with his head in his hands, flinched and looked up just in time to see Brody's head explode. He collapsed backward, a dark stain spreading across the crotch of his pants. The remaining bodyguards were petrified, dropping to their knees and begging for their lives. Ethan's face was a grim mask. "Are there any other Croft remnants like him left?" he asked. The bodyguards all shook their heads frantically. The police moved fast. Everyone connected to Croft Consolidated was arrested. Only Mr. Brody. Only Brody managed to get away. Ethan let out a slow sigh and turned for the door. Behind him, Finn fired several more shots, his expression unchanging as he sent the bodyguards on their way. "Hey," Ethan said, looking down at the terrified manager. His voice was a low growl. "Since your boss had the guts to harbor a fugitive, I assume he has the guts to clean up the bodies. Tell him my name is Ethan Vance. If he wants revenge for his friend, he can come find me at Vance Holdings." Leaving the spa, Ethan and his team drove to the forensics garage where the Maybach was being examined. The report was ready. The vehicle hadn't been tampered with in any way. The only issue was a puncture in the front right tire. The culprit was just a few shards of broken glass. Ethan held the pieces in his palm, his gaze thoughtful. Ground down by the weight of the car, the shards were incomplete. No matter how he arranged them, he couldn't piece together their original shape. He reviewed the facts of the scene. A blowout in the front right tire would cause the car to swerve sharply to the right. The incident occurred on a left-hand curve. A sudden loss of control, a driver's slow reaction, slick roads from the rain, the sheer weight of the vehicle. An accident was, in fact, not surprising at all. But if this was a meticulously planned murder, how did the killer know Victor would take that specific route that night and plant the glass in advance? Furthermore, the scene was covered by surveillance cameras. For 24 hours prior to the crash, no one had even gotten out of a car in that spot, meaning no one could have placed the glass there. And even if they had, how could a killer guarantee Victor's car would be the one to run over that specific piece of glass? Could it really have just been an accident? Even Finn, an expert in assassination, was stumped. From every angle, it looked like an accident. The possibility of murder seemed almost non-existent. Ethan's mind was a chaotic mess, but he couldn't accept that conclusion. This was Victor Vance, the old fox who played everyone like puppets on a string, the true kingpin of Port Sterling. Could he really have lost to a random act of fate? A moment later, one of Victor's bodyguards called Ethan. "Young Mr. Vance, these 3 shareholders are sticking to their story. They're all saying it has nothing to do with them. Can't you find another way to make them talk?" Ethan snapped. The bodyguard sounded hesitant. "We've been discovered by Harrison Vance. He's here now, demanding we hand them over." Ethan hung up without another word and headed for the manor. On the way, Leo Bishop called. "Boss, Dylan and I were thinking of coming to the manor to see you. I don't know. Is it a good time?" Ethan took a breath. "I appreciate the thought, but you two need to focus on your own job. Make sure she's safe, no matter what." "You got it," Leo said. "My guys have been watching her around the clock. Nothing's gonna happen. Boss, you take care of yourself, you hear?" "Yeah." About 40 minutes later, Ethan arrived at Phoenix Crest Manor and went straight to the holding cells where the Joker's crew had been kept. The 3 shareholders were now imprisoned there. Harrison Vance, flanked by a group of his own security, was in a standoff with Victor's men. Seeing Ethan, Harrison hurried over. "Ethan, stop this. Think about the big picture, will you?" Ethan didn't even glance at him. He walked straight up to the 3 shareholders, their faces beaten beyond recognition, and without hesitation, pulled his gun, pressing the muzzle to one man's head. "I don't want to hear your bullshit," he said, his voice ice. "Tell me, who were you conspiring with last night?" The shareholder trembled uncontrollably, shaking his head. "It really had nothing to do with us." The other 2 chimed in. "It really wasn't us. Mr. Vance, we were just talking about the acquisition with your father last night. We already signed the contracts. We had already sworn our loyalty to your father. Why would we hurt him?" Harrison's brow furrowed deeply. "Ethan, if these 3 die, all of Uncle Victor's work will be for nothing. Can't you just calm down?" Ethan, enraged, swung a fist into Harrison's face, sending him sprawling to the ground. In the same instant, Chase drew his weapon. Not to be outdone, Finn moved like lightning, and soon every man in the room had a gun pointed at the opposing side. "I am calm," Ethan roared, glaring down at his cousin. "If I wasn't calm, do you think you'd still be alive?" Harrison pushed himself up, spitting a mouthful of blood, and lunged back at Ethan. Ethan didn't flinch, but Harrison's fist only made it halfway before Finn intercepted it with a casual grab. With a seemingly gentle twist, he sent Harrison to the floor again. "You want to touch me? Can you even get close?" Ethan's eyes were vicious as he stared down at Harrison. "My father's dead, and you're the prime suspect. I'm telling you, if I find out you had anything to do with it, I'll make you wish you were never born." "Ethan Vance," Harrison yelled, getting to his feet again, his face livid. "Have I not told you? You don't lay hands on family. We are family. Family my ass. When I was a kid, anyone and everyone could shit on my head. Did you think of me as family then? When my mother and I were kidnapped, did you think of me as family? I was gone for 8 years. 8 years. Did you ever think of me as family? Couldn't you have at least pretended to look for me?" Harrison was speechless. The Vance dynasty truly owed his cousin more than they could ever repay. Ethan ignored him, turning back to the shareholder under his gun. "I'll count to 3, he said in a low, dangerous voice. "Tell me, last night were you conspiring with him?" He jerked his head toward Harrison. "I'll say it again, I would never move against my own family. He was my uncle." Harrison screamed, hysterical. Ethan, seemingly lost to fury, gritted his teeth and stared into the shareholder's eyes. "What? Ethan, stop this madness." Harrison tried to step forward, but Finn pressed a gun to his face, stopping him cold. "Ethan, too. It really had nothing to do with us. We really did swear loyalty to your father. Harrison came to see us these past few days, but we refused to even open the door. How could we conspire with him?" The shareholder shrieked, tears streaming down his face. "Mr. Vance, I'm begging you, it really wasn't us." Ethan closed his eyes, his finger tightening on the trigger. Just as he was about to fire, Victor's beautiful secretary rushed in. "Young Mr. Vance, don't. I have something to say to you." Ethan stared at the secretary for a long moment, then slowly lowered his gun. He followed her out of the cell to a quiet corner. "Young Mr. Vance, you can't kill those shareholders," the woman said, her voice full of sorrow, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "Otherwise, all of the chairman's work will have been for nothing." This beautiful woman, Evelyn Reed, was not just a stunning figure. She was brilliant, a graduate of a top university, and one of Victor's most capable aides. She was also the only woman who had remained in his favor past the age of 30. Hearing her words, Ethan scoffed. "He's gone. What does his life's work matter anymore? All I know is how he died. I can't believe it was an accident either, even if all the evidence points that way," Evelyn said, her voice choked with emotion. "But no matter what, all of this, the chairman left it for you. Finding the truth is important, but you can't be reckless. I understand how you feel, sir, I really do. But those shareholders had nothing to do with this. They were your father's men long ago. You should trust his judgment. Besides, even if they had second thoughts, they wouldn't be stupid enough to kill him right after a meeting." Her words made sense. In truth, Ethan knew this, but in his current state, logic was a distant concern. "Sir, the company is without a leader right now. The top priority is to stabilize things," Evelyn said. She took out her phone and sent a quick text. "The chairman's plan has reached its final, critical stage. We can't let it fail now, or you'll lose everything to Harrison." Ethan's face was grim. "So you also think my father's death is connected to Harrison?" Evelyn shook her head. "The chairman once said that while Harrison is ruthless, he would never harm his own family. But if my father didn't die, Harrison would never have a chance to inherit the Vance dynasty." Evelyn fell silent. She had entertained the same suspicion. After all, Victor's death benefited Harrison the most. But in her eyes, the most important thing now was to see Victor's plan through to its perfect conclusion, helping her young master take his rightful place, to honor Victor's memory. "Sir, whatever the case, you cannot act impulsively. Without proof, you absolutely cannot move against Harrison. If you do, you'll only anger your grandfather, and that will do you no good." At the mention of Theodore Vance, Ethan's heart sank. The old man was still in a coma. If he woke up and learned his youngest son was gone, Ethan couldn't bear to think about it. A short time later, a group of men and women who had received Evelyn's text arrived in a hurry. They all bowed their heads to Ethan. "Young Mr. Vance, please accept our condolences." Looking at the unfamiliar faces, Ethan was momentarily confused. Evelyn introduced them one by one. They were all executives from Victor's company and senior managers from Vance Holdings headquarters, mostly between 30 and 40. To hold such high positions at their age meant their abilities were undeniable. "Sir," Evelyn said, "these employees were all handpicked and trained by the chairman. As you can see, they're still young. He chose them specifically for you, as your own crack team." Seeing this evidence of his father's careful planning, Ethan felt an even deeper ache in his heart. His eyes welled up with tears again. "Sir, please return to the company as soon as possible and take charge," the group said in unison, prompted by a look from Evelyn. Ethan snapped. "My father's body is barely cold, and you're asking me about this? Huh." Evelyn frowned. "The company can't fall into chaos. What about the money Croft Consolidated owes us? What about Apex Construction, which the chairman just acquired, where morale is unstable? And what about Triumph Investments, which is at a critical point in its acquisition? If you don't take over now, who will clean up this mess?" Ethan retorted, "You all can decide what to do. I have my own business to attend to." The executives looked troubled, urging Ethan to reconsider, not to let Victor's life's work go to waste. But Ethan's mind was made up. He only wanted to find the truth. He was never good at business, and he had no interest in it. Seeing his stubborn refusal, Evelyn took a deep breath, her voice suddenly sharp with anger. Ethan Vance, can you be mature for once? Can you think about the big picture? Can you do one thing that would make your father happy? Since you came back, all you've ever done is piss him off. Have you done a single respectable thing? Her words stopped Ethan, who had been about to leave, dead in his tracks. The executives exchanged glances, shocked that she would dare to scold their young master. If you want your father to rest in peace, you not only have to find the truth, you have to protect his life's work. Evelyn said coldly, the path has been paved for you. The throne has been built for you. All you have to do is walk over and sit down. It's that simple. The rest of us know what to do. You just need to give the orders. The others all nodded in agreement. Sir, you must consider the big picture. Ethan's lips were a thin line. After a long moment of thought, he spoke. After my father's funeral, I'll go to the company. In the meantime, you all do what you need to do. You don't have to report to me. Only then did the executives breathe a sigh of relief. Evelyn's expression softened, a hint of a pleased smile on her face. Good. I heard the morticians say the burial is set for the day after tomorrow. 3 days from now, you must come to the company. Oh, and I'm taking those 3 shareholders from Triumph Investments with me now. I'm confident I can complete all the acquisition procedures within 3 days. When it's done, the credit will naturally fall to you. It will be a victory for you to ride in on, so the other board members won't look down on you. Ethan slowly nodded. Go on, get to it. Night fell. Ethan knelt in the morning hall, weary and grief-stricken, continuously feeding paper into a burning basin. Beside him, Isabel's face was drawn and pale. She sat with him in silence, her heart aching as she watched her husband in a state of sorrow she had never seen before. A short while later, Harrison entered the hall. He knelt beside Ethan, picked up a stack of yellow paper, and began feeding it into the flames. Ethan, you should go get some sleep. Eve will be here to take over from me after midnight. You can relieve her in the morning. Ethan didn't respond. Harrison sighed. What will it take for you to believe me? Ethan shot him a sideways glance. I only believe myself, he said coldly. Harrison said, Uncle Victor's death was sudden and shocking. I'll help you investigate. But I swear it wasn't me. The 2 cousins stared at each other for a long moment. Isabel gently squeezed Ethan's hand. Honey, you should rest. You've barely slept in 2 days. If you keep this up, your body won't take it. Ethan turned to his wife, his expression softening instantly. He forced a smile. You go sleep. You haven't rested since last night, either. Isabel replied. I want you with me. Please? Be good, just get some rest. Otherwise, I'll just stay here with you. Ethan was truly exhausted, and he was worried about his wife. He glanced at Harrison, then led Isabel to the grand hall to rest. They were too tired to even think about washing up. Once they were in bed, Isabel pulled Ethan into her arms, gently stroking his face. Her presence was more comforting than 1,000 words. Gradually, a tear rolled over Isabel's fingers. The beautiful woman bit her lip, her own eyes becoming misty as she held him tighter. Honey, it's okay to cry. You'll feel better. Ethan's body began to tremble, and he broke into heart-wrenching sobs. Izzy, I don't have a dad anymore. I just want to call him Dad. But I lost the chance. I'll never have the chance again. 2 days later, Victor Vance was buried. The most conspicuous person at the funeral was Benny. He had bought a dozen oversized memorial wreaths, and as they were being placed, he cried with such heart-wrenching anguish that he seemed even more grief-stricken than Ethan. Then there was Ron Wallace, the film director, who wailed and lamented as if he'd lost his own father. Many people whispered behind his back, mocking the great actor for laying it on a bit thick just to solidify his ties with the powerful family. Even Ethan thought Ron might be overdoing it, but then he remembered their decades-long friendship and figured it was probably genuine. In truth, Ron hadn't acted in years. He'd made a cameo last year playing a professional mourner, and his performance had been just as intense, earning him a good deal of criticism. The next day, Ethan went to the company to take over Victor's position. As soon as the news broke, it caused a sensation in the media. What the press relished most, of course, was the succession battle between the 2 cousins, Ethan and Harrison. In the public eye, Ethan was a good-for-nothing playboy, a world away from the capable Harrison. But with the inheritance Victor had left his son, it would be no easy task for Harrison to win. If their grandfather were to officially name Harrison as his successor, Ethan would certainly rebel. He could easily strike out on his own and not only stand up to the Vance dynasty, but potentially even surpass it. After all, before his death, Victor had maintained a stranglehold on the family's foundational business, import-export trade, with a 67% stake. This gave him absolute control over the major ports. Now, all of that was in Ethan's hands. Even if his grandfather wanted it back, it was a fantasy without Ethan's approval. That morning, Ethan sat through 4 consecutive meetings. The most important was the announcement of the successful acquisition of Triumph Investments. This made the employees see him in a new light. They couldn't believe that this legendary playboy had managed to crack such a tough nut on his first day. Faced with their praise, Ethan felt a deep sense of inadequacy. In reality, it was all due to the path his father had paved and the competence of Evelyn Reed. All he had done was sign his name. The final meeting was a confidential internal session with the senior executives. As the new boss, Ethan didn't know much about his father's company. He stayed quiet for most of it, intending only to show his face and stabilize morale. To his surprise, the executives were incredibly proactive. They spoke enthusiastically, not only analyzing the current situation with sharp insight, but also offering Ethan numerous suggestions for growth. The bolder ones didn't even hesitate to give him direct advice on how to defeat Harrison and win the succession battle. What boss wouldn't dream of a team like this? Looking at this team of tigers and wolves, Ethan's heart was filled with a mix of emotions. His father hadn't just brought the cake to his mouth. He had meticulously cut it into small pieces, just waiting for him to open his mouth. But his ambitions had never laid here. Although he had reluctantly agreed to take over for his father, what would happen to his brothers in the future? For now, though, that wasn't the priority. The most critical task was still investigating the cause of his father's death. Ethan remained convinced it was no accident. After the meeting, the young master took his team and continued the investigation. That evening, Theodore Vance, who had been in a coma for days, finally woke up. When a maid told him about Victor's accidental death, the old father's tears flowed freely. Overwhelmed by grief, he fainted again. Upon receiving the news, Eva and Ethan rushed to the area. Dr. Linus Hayes was performing acupuncture on their grandfather. A moment later, Harrison also arrived in a flurry. The 3 of them stood watch outside the bedroom, silent. About 10 minutes later, they heard the maid's cry from inside. "Sir!" The 3 of them burst in to see their grandfather coughing up a mouthful of dark blood, clutching his chest and gasping for air. Dr. Hayes was as calm as ever. "It's still stress-induced internal bleeding. However, it seems the medicine I've been using these past few days has been effective, or he wouldn't have woken up at all." He glanced at Harrison and Ethan and lowered his voice. "Don't upset him. Don't say anything you shouldn't. The medicine is almost ready. I'll go check on it. If anything happens, come get me." After Dr. Hayes left, Harrison immediately sat by the bed and gently took his grandfather's hand. "Grandfather, don't think about anything. Just rest." Theodore's eyes were cloudy. He struggled to turn his head, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his 2 grandsons and granddaughter. He couldn't speak a word. "Grandfather, you have to take care of yourself," Eva said, her voice choked with tears. Ethan pursed his lips and sat silently on the sofa, his eyes full of concern for the old man, equally unable to speak. After a long while, Theodore looked at him, his voice raspy. "Ethan, that massive enterprise your father left. You need to take it over as soon as possible. Cough, cough. The Vance dynasty can't afford any more trouble." Ethan nodded. "I've already taken over." The old man nodded in satisfaction, then turned to Harrison. "Harrison, my time is short. Logically, the position of successor should be yours, cough, cough. But I hope you 2 brothers can work together. Stop fighting. You can't fight anymore. I intend to split Vance Holdings headquarters in 2, a 50-50 division of assets, for each of you to manage. What do you 2 think?" Harrison blinked calmly. "Whatever you decide, grandfather." Ethan had never cared about assets. He nodded casually. "I'll listen to you, grandfather." The old man let out a slow breath of relief, then changed the subject. "Where's Lucy?" Eva quickly replied. "The maids have already put her to bed." "Bring her to me tomorrow," the old man said. "You're all busy, and no one looks after her. It'll be good for me to have some company." Cough, cough. "And Ethan, don't let your father's courtyard sit empty. You and Isabel should move into the manor." Ethan agreed. He was debating whether to ask about Mr. Watkins. On the way over, he'd had one of Victor's men find a copy of the butler's ID at headquarters and had just sent it to Jax to track his whereabouts. After all, for a man to vanish without a trace was more than a little strange. However, the next moment, the personal maid spoke up. "Sir, Mr. Watkins called a few days ago. He's in his hometown now, trying to reconcile with his son. He'll be back in a few days. I suspect he left without saying goodbye, because he was afraid you'd worry and wouldn't let him go home alone. He must have heard about what's been happening with the family recently. He told me to take good care of you." Theodore slowly shook his head and sighed. "I noticed he wasn't looking well the other day." "AI. Forget it. Arrange for some money to be sent to him. Let him sort out his family matters first. Cough, cough. That good-for-nothing son of his is useless for anything but squandering money. Hearing this, both Harrison and Ethan grew thoughtful. The former seemed to realize that the missing $40 million from the company books was likely taken by the old butler for his son. It was best not to let their grandfather know about such things. The latter's mind was in turmoil again. Was his investigation heading in the wrong direction once more? With that thought, Ethan excused himself to go to the bathroom. Once out of the bedroom, he hid in a corner and called Jax. Still nothing. Hey, I was just about to call you, Jax said. Found him. He bought a train ticket 2 days before your father's accident. Headed to Kansas City. I'm thinking he's either too old or has some medical condition that prevents him from flying, so he didn't buy a plane ticket. Ethan said nothing and hung up. In truth, he had never really believed Mr. Watkins had a motive to kill Victor. He had only connected them because the butler's disappearance had coincided so perfectly with his father's death. Now it seemed Mr. Watkins was no longer a suspect. Then who was responsible for Victor's death? Ethan couldn't figure it out. All the major players had been dealt with. Who else had the ability to plan such a precise murder? Or was it really just an accident? Ethan's heart was heavy. He leaned against the wall, dazed, and instinctively reached for a pack of cigarettes before remembering he was quitting and wasn't carrying any. With a sigh, he was about to head back to the bedroom when he happened to see the maid emerge from the treatment room, holding a bowl of medicine. She glanced around, and seeing no one, she lifted the bowl and took 2 sips before pausing outside the bedroom door for a long moment, then finally entering with the medicine. Ethan frowned. He understood immediately. It seemed his grandfather didn't trust Dr. Hayes and had the maid taste his medicine for him. Returning to the bedroom, Ethan acted as if he had seen nothing. He was well aware of his grandfather's suspicious nature. The old man was wary of everyone, not just an outsider like Dr. Hayes, but even his own children. It was nothing new. Given their grandfather's fragile health, the 3 grandchildren didn't want to disturb him for long. Theodore, being fed his medicine by the maid, waved them away. After drinking, however, he called Ethan back. Harrison's expression flickered strangely for a moment. He lowered his head and walked out of the bedroom, a subtle change that Eva, standing beside him, happened to catch. As soon as they were outside, the beautiful detective, exhausted from lack of sleep, asked, Harrison, what was that look supposed to mean? Harrison looked at her, confused. Don't play dumb, Eva said. You're surprised by grandfather's attitude toward Ethan, aren't you? And you probably can't accept the decision he made tonight, either. Harrison pursed his lips. Eva, I always thought we had a pretty good relationship, but I guess you don't know me at all. To be honest, I was a little disappointed by his decision. Ethan isn't cut out for business, and forcing him into it isn't good for the family. But on the other hand, Ethan is my brother. What grandfather gave him, he deserves. So, I can completely accept it. Just now, I was just. Harrison trailed off, not finishing his sentence. In truth, he just felt that their grandfather's change in attitude toward Ethan was too sudden. Eva stared into his eyes, her voice cool. You can be quite the hypocrite sometimes. Harrison looked even more exasperated. I really don't get it. Why is it that when I tell the truth, none of you ever believe me? Whether it's true or not, you know in your heart. Eva said, pausing for a moment. I just don't want to see the struggles of the previous generation repeated with you and Ethan. Harrison sighed. You're overthinking it. Actually, I've always believed that my father's death had nothing to do with you. Harrison nodded, gratified but said nothing. Just then, Dr. Hayes emerged from the treatment room. Unlike his usual habit of fleeing at the sight of the tigress, he actually took a couple of steps toward her. Take care of yourself, Eva, he said softly. You don't look well. It was probably the first time he had ever shown her concern. Eva wasn't particularly flattered. She muttered, cowered, and walked out. Harrison glanced at Dr. Hayes with a small smile. Not going after her? Dr. Hayes didn't respond, simply turning back into the treatment room. Outside the courtyard gate, Chase, who had been sitting on the stone steps, smoking out of boredom, quickly stood up at the sound of footsteps. Ms. Vance, you're... Eva walked past without a glance. Get lost. Yes, ma'am, of course, ma'am. Harrison, following close behind, shook his head in disgust. It was true what they said. For every person, there's someone who can put them in their place. It made no sense. Inside the bedroom, Theodore finished his medicine and dismissed the maid. He then had Ethan sit by his bed and asked abruptly, What's your take on your father's death? Ethan opened his mouth, but fearing any mention of the topic would be too much for the old man, he slowly shook his head. Grandfather, you should rest. I have my own plans for this matter. The old man's face was filled with sorrow. It seems you don't think it was an accident either. Have you found anything these past few days? Ethan was silent. Have you thought of who might have done it? The old man pressed. Ethan remained silent. Ah, Theodore sighed. So, you suspect Harrison. I suppose, besides him, there's no other plausible candidate. But that boy, he's never been one to harm his own family. It couldn't have been him. Ethan's eyes darkened. I checked. He was busy with the new factory construction those few days. Nothing suspicious. But was my father's death really an accident? Even though everything points to it now, I still can't believe it. This whole affair is very strange. Theodore slowly closed his eyes. After a moment of silence, he said, I will help you investigate. Ethan didn't speak, just nodded lightly. Theodore took his hand, changing the subject. Ethan, no matter what, you must hold on to the business your father left you. I'm a dying man. The future of the Vance family rests entirely on you and Harrison. Cough, cough. I heard your father mention once that you were planning to live abroad in the future. AI, just do it for my sake. Stay. Ethan's eyes were hesitant. It was a difficult decision. Before returning, he had promised his brothers they would leave the country after settling his affairs. To go back on his word now, because of his family crisis, felt wrong. Ultimately, each of his brothers had the right to live their own life. They couldn't revolve around him forever unless they all agreed on a free, unrestrained life that everyone wanted. Child, have you thought about how much of his life your father poured into all this? Don't let him down. Theodore continued to persuade him. The Vance family only has you two brothers to take on the responsibility now. Are you going to make me beg you? To be frank, if you really leave, your father's entire corporation will spiral out of control. Forget Harrison. Even I have no authority to manage them. Those executives are all elite soldiers your father personally trained. Do you want to see them rebel against the family? Ethan's brow furrowed. Grandfather, what are you talking about? I'll first find out if my father's death was an accident, and then we can talk about this. The old man stared at Ethan for a moment, then shook his head with a touch of disappointment. He didn't press further. I hope you won't disappoint me then, he said gravely. Go on back. I need to rest. Cough, cough. Not long after Ethan left, Dr. Hayes entered the bedroom with his medical bag, following the maid. After a thorough examination of Theodore, a peculiar, fleeting expression crossed Dr. Hayes's face. He said nothing, pursing his lips as he carefully checked the old man's pulse. After a long while, he finally spoke. Your pulse is still a bit weak. You should rest early. We'll do another acupuncture session tomorrow morning. With that, Dr. Hayes stood up, packed his medical bag, and slowly left the room. Throughout the entire process, Theodore's cloudy eyes were half closed, giving him a listless appearance. The maid closed the door, returned to the bedside with a washcloth, and while wiping the old man's face, she whispered, Dr. Hayes has been on the mountain these past few days. He comes to check on you every morning, noon, and night. He hasn't left. Theodore pondered for a moment. He hasn't asked, where Mr. Watkins is gone. The maid shook her head. Not once. After a pause, she added, besides practicing medicine, Dr. Hayes seems completely uninterested in anything else. He's been like that ever since he arrived at the manor. Theodore smiled faintly. From under the mattress, he took out a file folder and handed it to the maid. Go burn this. The maid took the folder and respectfully exited the room. Before burning it, driven by curiosity, she opened the folder. Reaching inside, she pulled out a single A4 sheet of paper. It was a personnel file. When she saw the name and photograph, the maid couldn't help but look surprised. No wonder, she muttered to herself. 2 more days passed. Ethan still had no leads on Victor's death. He had been to the accident scene no fewer than 10 times, searching for any clue to prove the accident was no accident, but he found nothing. Now, on a gloomy evening, his 3 brothers accompanied him to the scene once more. They still came up empty. On the way back, Benny, who was driving, kept glancing at Ethan in the rearview mirror. After a long hesitation, he finally couldn't hold back any longer. Boss, you think maybe this really was just an accident? Ethan's face was blank. He looked at the equally expressionless Finn. Say something. Finn's calm was, as always, unshakable. After all these days, we've found no trace of homicide. So, you think it's an accident? No question? Ethan asked. Finn didn't respond. Ethan then turned to Jax, sitting beside him. The young hacker pursed his lips, slowly met his boss's gaze, and shrugged. I think. Even he couldn't pull off such a perfect accidental murder, right? Leaving absolutely no trace. It's insane. I've pulled all the surveillance footage from the area. No suspicious individuals, nothing. This. Ethan knew who Jax is. He was Mike, the French assassin who had once been number 6 on their team, a specialist in making deaths look like accidents. Ethan had once trusted him implicitly, But Mike had developed a drug habit. Not only did he refuse to change, but he grew resentful and colluded with drug traffickers in a near-devastating attack on their team, an attack that had left only 5 of them standing. The current rankings of the 5 brothers were a result of that cataclysm. Afterward, Milo had been the first to return to the country, while Ethan and the others had hunted Mike across the globe. They had taken out 2 other traitors Mike had turned, and finally, in Nice, France, they had found Mike living under a new name. After a chaotic fight, the traitor had managed to escape. Since then, Ethan had lost his trail. He figured the traitor must have been scared witless, now hiding in some hole somewhere. "So, you also think it was an accident?" Ethan asked Jax. Jax looked troubled. "The problem is, we don't even have a solid hypothetical suspect. Other than Harrison." It was true. Setting aside Harrison, Ethan was completely clueless. Hearing Harrison's name, Finn's eyes lit up. "Boss, why don't I just go take him out? Whether he did it or not. We take him out first and ask questions later." Ethan waved him off. He paused, then looked at Finn. "What? You in a hurry to leave?" Finn fell silent, glancing at Jax. The latter hesitated to speak. The truth was the brothers had all seen it over the past couple of days. The Vance family was determined to keep Ethan here. But for 2 men with international warrants out for their arrest, staying was not an option. Who could guarantee they wouldn't get caught eventually? A carefree life on that island was their best choice. Seeing this, Ethan's mind was in turmoil. He wanted to live a free life with his brothers, but he didn't want to let his father down. At this moment, there was no way to satisfy both his brothers and his family. That evening, Ethan drove to the manor alone again. After checking on his grandfather, he went to the cells where the Joker and his accomplices were being held. Looking at the mangled forms of the Joker and Pig Mask, Ethan didn't hesitate. He put them out of their misery with 2 clean shots. It was time for this to end. White Fox watched through the transparent wall as Ethan executed the man she loved. She closed her eyes in despair. A moment later, Ethan pushed open the door to her cell. Her eyes were hollow. She sat on the floor, spaced out, not saying a word. "Let's go." Ethan wrestled with himself for a moment, then holstered his gun. White Fox was stunned for a long time before a look of disbelief crossed her face. "I'll take you down the mountain." "Down? Down the mountain?" she asked, her voice filled with incredulity. Ethan said nothing more, just turned his back and waited for her. Half an hour later, the GTR pulled up in front of a hospital. Ethan took a thick stack of cash from his bag and tossed it to White Fox in the passenger seat. "Go get yourself checked out. And in the future, it's best you leave Port Sterling. I can't guarantee I'll let you go next time I see you." White Fox silently took the money. After getting out of the car, she gave Ethan a deep bow. Just as Ethan was about to start the car, she suddenly knocked on the window. Ethan lowered it, his gaze cold and silent. "There's something. I never told you. I was going to save it to protect myself." White Fox's eyes darted around nervously. She stammered, "That research. It actually has a much higher success rate with people who are blood relatives. That was a conclusion your mother reached at the very beginning. The Celestial Axis kidnapped many fathers and sons before to run experiments. You could check for any recent disappearances of fathers and sons. Maybe you'll find a trace of the Celestial Axis." Having been locked up for so long, White Fox had no idea that Ethan and his father had already dismantled the organization. But her words made Ethan's brow furrow deeply. Just then, Leo Bishop called again. "Boss, a group of gunmen just stormed the winery and are fighting Sienna Sterling's people. I'm taking my guys to back her up now." Hearing this, Ethan was shocked. He no longer had time to ponder what White Fox had just said. He floored it and raced toward the winery. However, by the time he arrived, the battle was long over. Leo now had a prosthetic leg, but since it was new, he was still walking with some difficulty. "Boss, Sienna's okay. Most of her bodyguards are dead, and we lost a few of our guys too. Man, I don't know where those gunmen came from." Ethan clapped him on the shoulder. "You did good. Where's she?" Leo pointed to the main hall of the winery. "In there, drinking her sorrows away. That crazy lady. Turns out she kidnapped Tanner 2 hours ago. I figure those gunmen were probably drawn here because of him." Ethan, deep in thought, strode into the hall. Sienna heard his footsteps and glanced over her shoulder, a bitter smile on her face. Well, what wind blew you in?" Ethan looked at the bloody, mangled body of Deputy Mayor Tanner on the floor. He walked over to Sienna, his lips moving. "Stop this foolishness. Come with me. It's not safe here now." Sienna poured herself another glass of wine, her voice icy. "I don't need you to manage me. Ethan Vance, now we're true enemies." Ethan's lips thinned. He pointed at Tanner's body. "You spent all these days just to find him. Can't figure it out, can you?" Sienna gave a mocking smile. "Actually, it's not that hard to understand. It's because I promised my dear sister that I would kill him.